Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and welcome to the latest episode of the Hard Compound Live. For those of you who don't know, my name's Rich and I run and operate the Hard Compound. We're a one-stop shop for all things motorsport, and we can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And these videos can be found on YouTube, where they can be also found on the other channels as well. As I said, we're a one-stop shop for all things motorsport. We cover everything from Formula One to touring cars, IndyCar, sports car, bikes, rallying, NASCAR, supercars, and anything else that we can shake a stick at. And we cover that in the form of race reviews, race previews, throwbacks, breaking news, any like liveries, and anything else, as I say, that we can shake a stick at. We're here to share a love of motorsport, nothing else, no controversy, no abuse, no nonsense. Just here to share a love of motorsport between us all. So if you search for us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, just search for the Hard Compound. Come in and join the fun. We put 3 written articles out every day. These go out at about 9 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and 8 o'clock in the evening here in the UK. Yeah, so come along, join the fun. In case you hadn't noticed, we also do live video interviews just like this one. And just like this one, they are streamed on our YouTube, our Twitter, and our Facebook channels. They're automatically saved in the video section on Facebook and in the live section on YouTube. We have done over 180 of these now, which is incredible. We've had some fantastic guests from across the motorsport spectrum. Can't name them all, and I won't. Just to give you an idea, we've spoken to the likes of Mr. Mario Andretti and Jackie Ickx and Jackie Oliver and Chip Ganassi and Brian Redman. We've spoken with Mr. Tommy Byrne. We've spoken with John Watson, David Brabham, Stefan Johansson, Emanuele Pirro, guys who've won the Indy 500 like Alonso Jr. and Will Power. Alex Palou we spoke with, Lynn St. James, Ari Landa. Did I say Ari Landa? We've spoken with most of the British touring car grid, people that have won Le Mans. So you get the idea. They're all in the video section on Facebook, the live section on YouTube. So do go and check them out when you get a moment. But don't do it just yet, because we have got a brilliant live guest joining us very, very, very shortly. He's raced in Formula One. He stood on the podium at the 24 Hours of Le Mans. He's raced in various like single seaters. He's done everything, and he's even set up a company that made their own racing cars, which we're going to cover. He's an absolute legend in my eyes. He's been there, seen it, done it, and he survived the most dangerous period of Formula One. So without any further ado, please join me in extending a very, very warm welcome to Mr. Howden Ganley.
Good evening, Richard.
Good evening, Howden. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Yeah.
Good. Very pleased to hear it. Sorry about the long rambling intro. I try not to go on too long. But no, thank you very much for coming on and sparing some of your evening to come and have a chat with us. I'm very, very grateful.
You're most welcome.
Wonderful. Superb. Okay. Just want to say hello. We've got a few people tuning in the comment section. Hello to you all. Looks like we're all good on Facebook, Instagram, and Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. If you have any comments or questions, do pop them in, and we'll do our best to work them into the chat as we go. Right. Okay. I suppose it's a good time to get cracking. Oh, just hello to Keith Mail in the comments and a few others as well. You are all here. That's wonderful. Right. Before we get into things, Howden, how's everything going with you? How's the first 5 months of the year been for you?
Yeah, well, it's pretty good. Getting a bit old, have a few little health problems from time to time. A bit stiff when you get up in the morning. But other than that, no, I can't complain.
Excellent.
I'm here, still remember my own name, remember where I live. So things are pretty good.
Yeah, things are good. And obviously we still remember the career that you had, which we're going to go into. And there's like so much of it. And I should say this now, I am looking forward to the part where we talk about Frank Williams cars, because obviously they are my local team. I believe they're pretty close to where you are as well. They've always been my team. So anyone who's driven with Williams, I always want to have a little chat to.
Okay.
But that's all to come. I guess a good place to start is right at the very start. Obviously, you're originally from all the way on the other side of the world, over there in New Zealand. Where did the interest in motorsport come from?
It actually popped up out of nowhere, really. It was a bit like finding religion suddenly. I was totally into sailing, and we lived on the lake. My father was an extremely good yachtsman, and so I was introduced into sailing from when I was a little kid. And my father's ambition was that I should sail for New Zealand in the Olympics eventually. And then in winter, he wanted me to be an All Black as well. So I actually totally failed him in those. But one day he was going to the New Zealand Grand Prix at Ardmore in January 1955. And my brother, my next brother down from me, was going as well. And I thought, oh, well, I may as well go along and see what it is. And then I saw proper Grand Prix cars for the first time. There's Prince Beer and a 250F Maserati, and Peter Whitehead and a Ferrari, Tony Gay's a Ferrari, and a young guy called Jack Brabham in a Cooper Bristol. So at the end of the day, I thought, to hell with sailing, I'm going motor racing. I want to be a Grand Prix driver. So that was the beginning, January 1955.
I mean, I think with those cars and those names that we all now so familiar with, I think it was almost inevitable that you're going to get hooked on it. I mean, I speak to people of your generation. I mentioned I spoke with Mario Andretti, and he said that he first went to Monza and he saw, you know, like Fangio and Ascari and Farina and all the Ferraris and everything. I thought, and just like what you've just said, I thought, yep, that'll do it. That'll that'll hook you in.
Yeah.
How did you first go about kind of trying to get behind the wheel? Because I know you went initially down the journalism route.
Yes. Well, I was a pretty dumb kid. And so, although I had a very expensive private school education, I never managed to pass any exams, which must have been pretty despairing for my parents having spent all that money. But because I was interested in motor racing, but I was too young to have a driving license. So I started writing articles about motor racing for some local newspaper and magazines. And then my parents eventually relented, realizing that I wasn't getting anywhere. They said if I could find a proper professional job, whatever that meant, they'd let me leave school. I was 16 then. And so I went to see the editor of the local newspaper, the biggest provincial daily in New Zealand, Waikato Times, and I showed him stuff I had published. So he gave me a job instantly. So at 17, I became a newspaper reporter. Well, I was called a cub reporter. So I had to do really boring stuff like the Ladies' Red Cross meetings and the produce markets, and I hated it all. Anyway, then they tried to get me on obituaries. No way. I'm going to go around to see some poor old lady whose dearly beloved had just fallen off his perch the day before.
Yeah.
But I managed to get a motoring page going. First it was a quarter of a page, and then it was half a page, and then it was a whole page. And I got that every week. So I did all that for 2 years. And I saved up, I managed to persuade my mother to let me race her Morris Minor at one of the Hamilton Car Club events. And I had about 3 races and did reasonably well. So I thought, right, now I got to get a proper car. And the only one that seemed to be within reach, there was a Lotus 11, the only one in New Zealand,
Wow.
which was for sale for £1,200. In those days, New Zealand pound and an English pound about the same. So £1,200. So how do we get enough money for that? And finally, I scratched enough money together. I had a bloke who was going to come in with me, and he bailed out at the 11th hour. So I managed to persuade my mother to loan me the other half of the money. So 600 quid I got, and she loaned me another 600 at a fairly steep rate of interest anyway. So then, having bought the car, I applied to the newspaper for leave of absence for 2 months to do the whole New Zealand series, which started at Ardmore, and it would go to Levin and Wigram, Dunedin, Derrida, all the way down the country. And so the editor then said, no, they would not give me leave of absence to go. So I went back to my desk and I typed out my letter of resignation and plonked it on the editor's desk. And that was it. And then he came and said, oh, well, okay, now we'll give you a leave of absence. I said, too late, because in the hour between, I had phoned a friend who whose stepfather ran a construction business, road construction, and it paid about 3 times what the newspaper job paid. So I was off there. So that was my escape from the newspaper. So I had 2 years. I was quite keen on it originally because Paul Freer, if you remember Paul Freer, was a journalist, and he raced at Le Mans. And then a couple of times he turned up at Spa just to look, and then they put him in a car, and he had a second and a fourth. Amazing journalist doing that. Anyway, so that was then I raced the Lotus. I was very fortunate that when I went to the first big race, which was Ardmore, it was the New Zealand Grand Prix meeting, but the support races. And in the first one of those, I finished. I won the 1100 class, and it gave me £15, which meant that that was all the money I had in the world now, because I was flat broke when I stood on the start, when we were on the start line. So now I had £15. Oh, okay. So then I was entered in another race in the afternoon, which was only New Zealanders were allowed to run. Anyway, I won it, and I paid £150. So at the end of the day, I'd won £165. Wow. I do the whole season on that. So my mother was quite excited. She said, "Oh, look, you could make a living out of this." I said, "Well, yeah, one day." So that was a great start. And then I went on to all the races and generally won the 1100 class, or finished second in the 1500 class. So a little trickle of prize money coming in all the time. Yeah. So that really got me going.
Yeah, that's a strong start. I mean, did you expect or think that you would be so successful, or at that level so soon? I mean, was it after a couple of races you thought, I can do this, I can beat these guys?
I was possibly way too confident. I was not surprised that I could get on the pace.
Yeah. I mean, obviously it was like a huge shot in the arm, to go racing, and especially as you said, with no money in your back pocket and going racing, it's a bit of a risk, and to have that reward, and as you say, the trickle of money coming in. And also you were obviously still working. I've got here, was it as a foreman at the concreting company?
Yes. Well, the first contractor I went to, then I met a guy, and he broke off and went and set up by himself. And then eventually he asked me, after the season was over, he asked me to come and work for him. Okay. Then I sort of became the foreman of one of the gangs, because with my very expensive education, I could do joined up writing, and I knew how to calculate the amount of ready-mix concrete, the volume you needed for certain jobs, because I could do arithmetic as well, strangely enough, which gave me a leg up on some of the others. There's a different educational level in the contracting business.
Yes, I mean, well, obviously here we are many years later, and it's my day job as well, the construction industry. So yeah, all the good people start there,
right? Yeah.
And the best ones leave. I didn't. But it was obviously around this time. Obviously, just for those tuning in, we're talking sort of very early kind of 60s here, aren't we? 1960s.
Yes. Well, I bought the car just after my 18th birthday, I guess it was. So it was 1960, but then the big events were in 61, 62.
Okay, right. I've got here, was it around 61, 62, around that time, after you've had some success, excuse me, in the motherland, you decided to move over to the UK. Was that purely just to pursue the racing?
Yes, well, having done 2 seasons there, and the decision was, do I try to be a big fish in a little pond, like New Zealand, it's pretty small, or do I go and try to swim in the big pond in England? And really the sensible thing was come and swim in the big pond, because if you want to get to Formula One, that's where you got to be. Yeah. So it wasn't a hard decision. So then I had another little bit of luck, was that my grandfather, like I suppose depends which side of the soil you're on, my grandfather died, and when eventually his money, he was a very wealthy guy, but enough trickled down to me, and I was fairly low on the totem pole, but it was enough to buy a one-way fare doing them. So that was taken care of. So
Wow.
why I came.
And then obviously we'll come to Tim Schenken later. I spoke with him, and he said that it was quite a crossing when he came over, because it was many hours. And I can't remember how long it was it on the boat? But whereas now you can be from one side of the globe to the other in 24 hours or less. That wasn't the case with you, wasn't it?
No, well, I flew from Auckland to Sydney and caught a ship there. It was an awful old Greek ship, with lots of young people on it, all coming to England, but it took forever. I don't know, the thing must only gone about 10 knots to the hour or something. So it was a long time. And eventually we got here into the rain and the mist.
Yes, it's weird. It doesn't matter what generation you're from. Anyone who comes to the UK from any other country always mentions the rain and the the rain and the cold. I've had a few Italians on here, and they said it was a huge culture shock. And yes, good old Blighty and our weather. So obviously, you got over here, and I mean, I did see that you went to Autosport, or there was an advert in Autosport, or there was some link to Autosport that got the
Yes.
ball rolling here in the UK.
Yeah, well, by the time I got here, after I paid the fare and I'd paid off all my debts and everything with racing in New Zealand, the time I arrived in England, I had £25 left in the whole world. That was my worldly wealth. So I needed to find a job pretty quick, although you could get a nice meal for about 1 and 6pence at Lyons Corner House, but I had to get going. And so I bought Autosport. Used to come out on Fridays in those days. And situations vacant. There was a job going at Lotus, but that was working on Lotus Elite, servicing Lotus Elites at Pan's Hangar. So I opted to give that one a miss. And then there was an ad for a company called Vanderbilt, not Vanderbilt, Vanderbilt, BYL, Motor Racing. It was supposed to sound a bit like Vanderbilt, I think, but it wasn't. Anyway, there was this bloke who ran it. He had Mark 10 Lotus, Mark 9 Lotus, had a Lotus 11, had an Elva, and so some other, I can't remember what the other one was. Anyway, so I went there and yeah, okay, we'll take you on as a mechanic, and we've got another mechanic coming shortly. So trying to maintain 4 cars and fix one that was damaged as well. That was actually a pretty full-time job. So I worked a huge number of hours. And the lure for me was, he said, oh, yes, and we'll enter you in some races. I thought, oh, hey, this is good, isn't it? Correct it. Pretty soon I sussed out he was not going to enter me in any races. And there was no other mechanic was coming. So I was doing the whole lot by myself, and rebuilding the engines, rebuilding gearboxes, everything. And I wasn't a mechanic. I didn't really know that much about it. So, yeah, I think I lasted with him about 6 or 8 weeks. And then I realized he was a scammer. So I thought I need to move on from here. And I had read about Graham Hill going to the steering wheel club, buying half a pint of bitter and making it last all evening while he attempted to meet people so he get a drive. And I thought, oh, okay, well, it worked for Graham. I'll give that a go. And I had a friend from New Zealand who'd become the editor of what was the magazine now? Sporting Motorist, no, some name like that. Became Auto Course anyway.
Okay.
And so he was a member of the steering wheel club, and he got me in there. And then one night I was there with him, and he introduced me to a chap who owned Falcon Shells, which is, if you remember, a little company that made glass fiber bodies to put on Terrier chassis or 10 chassis or whatever it was. And he was running a works car. So my friend Bill told him that I was the fastest thing on 4 wheels, and the best thing he could do was hire me as his works driver. And he said, no, I've got a really good works driver. I'm very happy with that. So I thought, okay. Oh, amazing. He called me a few days later and he said, I've entered you in a race at Silverstone. I've got my regular driver in one race and you in another race. So off we go to Silverstone. I'd obviously never seen it before. But I managed to be a little bit quicker than the other driver and went reasonably well in the race till I spun. And I thought, well, let's blow that chance. And he said to me afterwards, I'd like you to come and work for me. I'm going to build a new GT car and I want you to be my development engineer. And I thought, what I know about development engineering, you could write on the back of a postage stamp. And
Right.
but anyway, so, oh, yes, of course. Yeah, well, you know, when you want to get somewhere, no mountain seems too high, does it?
No,
So we did that, and we got this car in production, and then I could build my own lightweight racing car in the evenings, which I did there. And I got a friend from New Zealand to come over and be my mechanic. And it was the Falcon 515. And so there I was. Now I had a works drive, just like magic, you know, lucky.
Wow.
Unfortunately, the company got into a bit of financial trouble, probably not helped by my racing. But and then one of the shareholders also owned part of Marcos, and he said, I don't want you guys beating the Marcoses, which I was starting to get amongst them. And so they cancelled the whole racing program. So I said, what, you mean no racing? It's all over? He said, yeah, we're selling a little racing car you built. We're going to sell that. And all you need to do now is come to work 5 days a week and you can build a road car. So I went out and made a phone call because I knew George Henrod, who was running the Gemini Works team. And I said, any chance of a job? He said, yeah, I've just fired my only mechanic. And so we agreed, okay, John and I could start there the next day. So we said to the Falcon guy, okay, bye-bye, we're gone. And so next thing, we were mechanics for the Gemini Formula Junior team.
Wow. Wow.
So that was another quick switch.
Yeah. It kind of feels like things came along just at the right time, and like wheels within wheels, and people were moving around, and you were able to slot into places.
Yes, we were. It worked well for us. John, my friend, he was a really ace mechanic. Later, we worked for Brabham's on Jack's car. And by then, I was learning a little bit. I knew how to thread a nut on a bolt and all that. And fortunately, I had learned to weld. And anyway, so the Gemini couldn't afford to dyno the engines. So John had to rebuild the engines on the bench and then run them in the car. And that was in the days when there was testing at Brands Hatch every Wednesday, well, a whole day, Wednesday. And so you had sort of sensible people coming and running their Formula Juniors or twos or whatever in the morning. And then at lunchtime, because it was half day closing, then the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker would all turn up in their vans and things. And everyone would be going around and around the short circuit at Brands. And so George, the team owner, he said to me, well, you've done a bit of racing. Can you run this engine in? And it was pouring with rain. Somehow I happened to be a lap much quicker than anybody else. So he said, oh, okay, well, you can now be my number 2 driver. I'll get rid of the other one and you can be the driver. So, okay, that's good. But the bad news is, he said, you can't start until after the next race. So at the next race, the number 2 driver's car got run into from behind and badly damaged. And then the number 1 driver, it was Roy Pike actually, spun and went into the bank and broke his leg. So George said, well, looks like you're the number 1 driver. So I'd gone from the mechanic to the number 1 driver, and I still hadn't done a race. So I did the rest of the season as a mechanic and a driver. But, so yeah, another stroke of luck. I didn't realize, I thought these cars are really difficult to drive. I didn't realize how awkward they were. In fact, Peter Proctor, the late Peter Proctor, wonderful guy, he'd been a Works Gemini driver, and he said to me some years ago, that Gemini was the worst car I ever raced. They were really hard to drive. But fortunately, I didn't know any better. Anyway, unfortunately, at the end of the year, Esso withdrew their sponsorship from all the little teams, peripheral teams, because they had now 3 Formula 1 teams. So they had Lotus and Cooper already, and then Jack started the Brabham Formula 1 team. So that was the end of that.
Goodness,
so, you take sort of 2 steps forward and then 1 back. So then when I had been at Falcon, I had designed some wire wheel hub adapters to convert a car off. You wouldn't do it today. Convert a car from having pressed steel wheels to have wire wheels with a center lock, jazzy, sexy racing. So I designed these adapters, and then I was quite lucky that, so I'm unemployed, Germany's closed down, and need a job. And the chap who had the contract to machine the wheels hired me. So I went and worked in this machine shop for some months, machining these hub adapters. And at the same time, I designed and built a Formula 3. Well, it was just when Formula Junior was finishing, and it was going to Formula 3, so 1100, but down to 1000 cc. So I designed the car. I bought it in New Zealand. Hang on, let's get rid of that. And in New Zealand, I had gone to night school, learned to weld. And then my friend who owned the machine shop, he was a friend of the guys who owned Arch Motors. And they were building the Lola chassis at that time. And he took me around there, and Bob Robinson, who was one of the partners, he taught me to gas flux weld, that everybody used. So that was lucky. So I built this frame, and we were getting on with it. And then the guy said, "I'm not sure I can afford to do this." So I left there and got a job working in WD&HO Will's tobacco warehouse, stacking cartons of tobacco, which wasn't quite the career path.
It was a sidestep.
Yeah, it was a bit of a diversion. Anyway, luckily, one night the phone rang, and it was Ian Young, my old friend Ian Young, who was Bruce McLaren's manager. And he said, "Bruce is here, wants to talk to you." Oh, okay. So Bruce comes on, and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Not a lot." I wouldn't say I was doing it. It was like, I don't know what you want, but I'm ready.
Yeah.
He said, "Right, well, I'm expanding the team now, and I want to employ New Zealanders, and you want a job." So I said, "Oh, yeah, thank you. Right, I'll come." So, they had a little workshop in New Malden with a dirt floor. So I rocked up there a few days later and found I was employee number 3. But
Yeah. I saw you were the third ever employee for McLaren, which is
on the shop floor, where there was Ian Young, who was the secretary manager, and then Bruce and his wife Patty, they were the company directors. So yeah, I was the third on the shop floor. But initially, I had to be a gopher. Go for this, go for that, and then I was told to go to Cooper's one day, because Bruce was still driving for Cooper, and get some tube and make some chassis stands, because the situation was they only had a big wooden crate that had been the Climax engine crate, coming back from New Zealand from the Tasman series, and so they needed a proper chassis stand. So you'd go and see John Cooper, and you can have some tube out of the rack there. Help yourself. So I went along and I found John Cooper, and I said, "G'day, Mr. Cooper. My name's Howden. I work for Bruce." And he says, "You can have tube." "Yep, help yourself, old boy." So I got the tube and then went back to the workshop, and the others had all gone home. So I just cut and shut and welded these things together and made 2 sets of chassis stands. And when the others came in the morning, they said, "Oh, who did you get to weld these?" I said, "Well, I welded them." "You can weld like that?" "Well, you didn't tell us you could." "When you didn't ask, did you?" Anyway, so now I was the fabricator. So that got me up a next leap. And then first job was to modify the back of the previous year's Tasman car that Bruce had won the championship in. And so it was all done, and we were going to Silverstone testing with the modified car and the new one as well. And the night before, Bruce said to me, "You still got a crash helmet?" "Yeah, bring it along." So next day, after he'd run the cars, I got to have a drive in the Tasman car, 2.7 Cooper. That was pretty magic.
Wow. I always ask this to people. I'll probably ask it a bit later on as well. When you get into a car like that, having done a bit of racing before and things like that, when you get into a car that's that much more powerful, I mean, what did you think of it? Because obviously you had success in less powerful cars.
Yeah,
When you got into that one, was it a good shock or a bad shock?
very good shock.
Good.
I think the extra horsepower is always very enjoyable, and you just adapt to it immediately.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that's more horsepower is good.
Yes, absolutely. Which is great. And I mean, again, I mean, we're talking sort of. We're now. I guess we're around sort of late sort of 60s here, aren't we? I think.
Well, I joined. That was 64 by then.
Okay.
I joined them in June 64, and then worked on the X1 Ford car that McLaren's were contracted to build. Went to America with that, and then came back to England, and I was put on the Formula One car, and it was a pretty upwardly mobile company because we built the first McLaren, the M1, in sort of September, October of 64. And in May of 66, we were at Monaco with the first Formula One car. So we'd gone from the first sports car through all the other sports cars, the Ford X1 project, and now we're at Monaco with a Formula One car. So I was lucky enough to be on the Formula One team, and was on that car at Monaco. And the other thing that was lucky for me, once again, lucky, two things. We had tested the prototype at Riverside in California, and we didn't have a starter motor, so we had to tow start it every time. And Bruce had borrowed a Mustang from Carroll Shelby, and I was selected to be the tow car driver. So we would pull it out of the pits, the engine would start up. Bruce would let it go, let the rope go, and off he'd head. And then I would chase him for the lap. Well, he'd pull away, but I would do the rest instead of turning around and coming back, I'd do the rest of the lap. So I had that under my belt. And then when we went to Monaco, we had a workshop down the waterfront. We come down onto the front to turn right to the tunnel. If you turned left, you went down there a little way. And there was a workshop there. So we had to tow it around to the pits every day. So I was a tow car driver. So you had 3 days of practice and then plus the race day. So I had 4 days of not quite at race car level, but low down. I'd been around the track. And so two things, when I came back there to race in Formula 3 in 69, I at least knew roughly what it looked like. And even better, at the end of 71, when I was asked to go to Riverside and race the BRM Can-Am car, I had done all those laps in the tow car. So it wasn't strange to me.
Yeah.
It's little things like that. Very, very lucky.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I was on the Formula One team at McLaren's, and then after that, because of the engine problems, it was sort of turning to rubbish. And I went and got a job at Lola because I was building a Brabham in my garage at home, thanks to a lot of help from Ron Toronak. And I didn't really enjoy it. I'd only been there about 3 weeks. And Ford had their spares place in the adjoining factory. And I was standing outside on lunchtime, sunning myself. And Peter Revson came up the path. He said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Oh, I left McLaren's. I've come to sort of a 9 to 5 job." He said, "Oh, are you enjoying it?" I said, "No." "Do you want to come work for me on Can-Am?" I said, "Yep, I'll come." So, and he paid me American wages. So I did that. And then I'd also previously been seconded to Ford Motor Company on the X1 Ford project because they thought I was the suspension expert. I don't know where they got that idea, but I wasn't. Anyway, so I went and worked on that on the automatic transmission program, and they paid me American wages. So at the end of all that, I was able to come back to England early 67, and I had the money to buy a brand new BT21, a new van, a new trailer, and an engine. McLaren's got me an engine off Cosworth at a discount. And then I set off Formula 3 racing all over Europe.
I mean, I'm just loving the names that are coming up already, and all these people. Peter Revson's in there, and all the like Ron Toronak's in there, and all these people that have just around at the time and things
Yeah,
just
yeah.
just have helped you sort of nudge you in the right direction and gone racing and things like that, which is fantastic. You mentioned F3. I wanted to talk about F3. And there was a question here actually from Simon Steele on Facebook. Hello, Simon. I'm going to come to your question in just a minute about Formula 3. You said you were building a Brabham. Was it the BT21?
No, I bought a brand new. Because I was building this car. I bought a frame from Ron and a body, and then I used to go to two of my friends worked for Winkleman Racing, and they had the same model Brabham, except it was a Formula 2 and not a Formula 3. But all the things like the pedals and the gear linkages and everything were all the same. So I used to borrow bits off them and take them back to McLaren's in the evening and copy them myself, made my own.
Nice.
And then, but it took forever and a day. And then, of course, I went off to America to be on Can-Am. And that would have been what would that have been? A BT 14 or 15, I can't remember. Very similar cars. Anyway, so I cut across all that, bought the 21, and then I sold the car I built, which gave me some more capital to buy a spare engine and that. So yeah, that all worked out pretty. So in those days, you could travel all over Europe as long as you lived in your van, didn't go in hotels, and you didn't have a mechanic. If you were only mechanic, you could make it pay eventually. My first season, 67, I lost probably on paper, I lost about £1,000. And then the second year, I about broke even because I was getting better start money. I'm becoming better known. And then the third season, by which time I was able to afford a B15 Chevrolet, I actually made money. So over the 3 years, it all worked out.
It took, and obviously took that time to to be in the plus, as it were. I did see though where you were racing though. You did a lot in, especially 67. You did a lot in Denmark and in Sweden. There was a lot of racing around there. I was just wondering why there?
Well,
Was it easier?
Denmark, Sweden, and Finland, because they paid the best start money.
Okay.
I had to have the start money and then a bit of prize money from time to time. And when I could afford it, if I'd had a good run out there, maybe done 3 race meetings, then I could come back and do 1 or 2 races in England where you got no start money.
Right.
But I just wanted to learn the circuits and get more experience. So that's why I concentrate on Scandinavia. Although I did race in Hockenheim.
Yeah.
I went to Spain, to Jarama. So yeah, I did a lot of races.
Yeah, and this was all just with the car and a van and just driving through Europe, I guess.
Yeah, driving all over Europe.
That sounds great. And obviously, it was pretty tricky, to begin with, but that does sound good. Now, for the romantics, it does sound very, very nice. Just quickly, in Finland, there are some terrific circuits out there. I spoke to one of the guys who does the Euro NASCAR series, and I've forgotten the name of the circuit. It was out in the forest, and you came downhill right-hander back into where the pits and everything were, having been out in the forest for about an hour and a half. And
that'd be Hämeenlinna. There was a crossover at one point.
That's it, Hämeenlinna, yeah.
And the other one was Ganley, that was owned by Kurt Lincoln, who was Nina Rent's father.
Oh, okay. Wow. Yeah. That's a cool link. We just got a comment here from Guillaume Ribeiro. Hello, Guillaume said about and he just simply said Imatra. Yes, that was a heck of a circuit. I do remember the Imatra circuit. That's a good one.
No, I never went there.
Yeah, I think that was a bit later, or a bit nearer this neck of the woods. But yeah, very cool. So obviously it was a great way to live, I suppose. Eventually, once the once the money was in the plus. I just want to actually no, I do want to talk about Hockenheim because this, people of a younger age only know it in its current incarnation. years and years ago, it was a proper, what I call the proper Hockenheim out in the forest. It was sadly where we lost Jim Clark, of course. But what did you think of racing at Hockenheim? Because it was the little, what is now the stadium section, and then you're off into the trees, aren't you?
Out into the trees. Yeah, I do recall thinking this is seriously dangerous, because I can remember we're racing in the rain there and going around that, because it wasn't a straight where you were left the stadium. It was a long curve till you got to the tighter curve, and then it was straight coming back. But going around that curve, and there's no Armco, it was just the trees. And I thought, if you ever went off in there, you'd probably kill yourself. And sadly, that's what caught Jim Clark.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was stupidly dangerous, really.
Yeah. It appears to be like a recurring theme when I ask people about it. They say it was terrifically high speed. I forget who I was speaking with. It was one of the guys. Forget who it was, but they were racing. I think it was probably in the 80s, I think. And he just found it boring. I think it might have been someone like Siegfried Storr or someone, and he said he just found it boring. He said this isn't driving. You know, he liked the technical side of driving, and all he did was just go very, very fast, and he wasn't a fan of it. But yes, so yes, I always like to ask about these older circuits. I did spot. Was it not? Is it 69? I think it might have been your first time racing at Monaco. You mentioned you'd been there on the McLaren car. I think it was, excuse me, I think it was 69, having been to Crystal Palace before that. What did you make of Monaco the first time
that was the first time I raced that car. I had the 21 for the 2 seasons, and I sold it, and then I had ordered a BT28, because my friend Tim Schinken, he was the works driver, and I thought, oh, I can sort of tap into the developments. But there was very long delivery on it. And then Rodney Bloor said to me, I've got a B15 in delivery position. Would you like that? And luckily I said, yes, I'll take that. So I had to go to Chevron and help finish building the car. And then Monaco was my first race in it. But as I said, at least I knew which way the circuit went.
Sure.
And that was a bit of a battle. You had to battle your way through the heats. And then you would get some money if you got through the heat. If you didn't, you went away empty-handed. So you had to qualify for the heats. Then you had to battle your way to get into the final. So I did manage to get into the final. Unfortunately, the Chevron at that time was very understeery car. They were all a terrible understeer. And I had some theory coming around the gasworks hairpin, as it was in those days, that if I just let the thing understeer into the curb would deflect it. And then after it folded up the bottom wishbone, I found out I was wrong. It didn't deflect it, it just crunched the rest of the suspension. So there wasn't such a good introduction to Monaco, but at least I learned the track even better, so I had the practice sessions and the heat and the half the final. So then I set to and tried to sort the car out. And gradually it got better and better. And I wasn't quite so dependent on European start money, because in my gearbox business, which I started a couple of years earlier, was becoming pretty successful. So I had a little bit more income and I could afford to buy the best kit. So I went to Lucas and bought their absolute latest engine. And when they had an upgrade, I took it. And I used to have them rebuild the engine every race. One thing I always stayed away from was engines. Not my thing. Suspension, gearboxes, engines, stay away. So that's why I had pretty sharp engines.
Yeah. Love that. I love that philosophy. Step away from the engines. I did spot, though, that race, I think it was Monaco 69, some of the people that were on the grid with you. Obviously, you mentioned Tim Schenken.
Tim and Ronnie Rayner.
It was, there's like Rainer Vissel. There was, I think Ronnie Peterson was there. Jean-Pierre Jabouille was on it. Patrick Depailler was on it. And there's a few others. I mean, some seriously talented chaps behind the wheel there.
Yeah, well, everybody wanted to do Monaco if they could afford it. And it used to be, the myth was that if you won the Formula 3 race, as had been previously with the Formula Junior race, almost certainly got you a Formula 1 contract. So everybody wanted to do it. Everybody wanted to win it. And of course, those people that you mentioned, they mostly did manage to battle through the heat. So they're all in the final. So it was pretty tough competition there.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, they went on just as you did into Formula One, which we'll come to. I also spotted that you took podiums. It was the Lincolnshire International Trophy at Cadwell, took podiums at Karlskrona in Sweden. Just quickly, I did spot though you alternated between the Brabham and the Chevron that year. I spoke with Mike Wiles; he's a big fan of Chevron.
No, that's not actually. So I ran the Chevron all season.
Okay.
And when I first got the new engine, I went to Crystal Palace and beat Emerson in the heat. So that was a big step forward. And then I got into that huge dice at Cadwell with Tim Schenken. He beat me, and in the last race. But the only time I drove a race to Brabham, I finished the season. I sold the car, sold everything, because I was traveling in a different direction by then. And Jeff Urin called me, and he said, "I've got a brand new BT28. I want to run in the last non-championship race at Thruxton." And he said, "I'm told you're the guy that needs to drive it." So that's why I went and did that one race. Unfortunately, they put wings, 2 sets of wings on it. Formula 3 car at Thruxton with wings doesn't work. Anyway, so that was the only time I drove the Brabham.
Okay.
I did test other cars, one other car. What had happened was then I did the race at Cadwell, and then we had the last big event at Brands Hatch with the ER Hall Trophy. And every man and his dog, like Monaco, every man and his dog came. And there must have been over 100 Formula 3 cars. And you had to battle your way through the heats to get in the final. And unfortunately, in my heat, I was on pole, and then so it was pretty glaringly obvious. And I jumped the start. So although I won it on the road by a long way, I had they usually get a minute penalty, but you got no chance in 10 laps of getting back, lapping everybody in 10 laps. So I finished way down the field, which meant that I had to start the final way down the field. And I thought, there's no way I'm not going to win this, but I didn't. But in getting to the lead, with a leading bunch, which I did at the end, I set a 100-mile-an-hour lap, which not long before had been the Formula 1 lap record. And so that got me a huge amount of publicity, and the publicity went as far as Bruce McLaren. So a couple of weeks after that event, I get a phone call from Bruce, another phone call from Bruce McLaren. He said, "I see you're going pretty well. Would you like to come to Goodwood for a Formula 1 test?" So, well, what do I say? Thank you very much. So
let me think for a nanosecond. Yeah.
So at the end of the test, unfortunately, just as I thought I'd got it together, the thing ran out of oil pressure. It had been Denny's car from the Mexican Grand Prix. The engine was up on its fire. So I thought, another opportunity gone. Bruce said, "Oh, that's really good." Right. He said, "I'm going to put you into Formula 1 at the end of 1970. And meantime, I'm putting you in the works Formula 5000 car for the whole of 1970. So that's why I sold my entire outfit, car, engine, transport. I didn't need any Formula 3 anymore. But out of interest, Lotus called me and asked me, would I like to drive for them in Formula 3. I didn't bother to mention the bit about Bruce. So I went and spent some time at Snetterton in their car, which I thought was pretty impressive, actually. It's amazing how these things happen. So I was offered the Chevron Works drive, I was offered the Brabham Works drive, Lotus Works drive, and I had to say, sorry, I've got other plans. I was off into Formula 5000.
Wow. I mean, and obviously F5000 It's a huge deal. You know, they're very powerful cars. I mean, they weren't far off F1 from what I can gather, speaking to people who have raced in them.
Hmm.
Um, the first I've got here, the first car was it the M108 was the first one that you raced.
M10B wasn't the model.
M10B. Oh, I got there. I
M10B,
mean,
yeah.
and my eyes have gone funny. I've actually, I mean, I had to Google some of the pictures of this. It was a terrific looking car. Did it go as well as it looked?
Yeah, it did. It was really an M7 Formula One car, but with a
Right.
Chevy engine on the back.
Oh, okay.
So,
Okay.
and it was a really stiff chassis. And the two works cars were actually a bit better spec than the customer cars, luckily. So Peter Gethin had one works car and I had the other one. But they were not allowed to be run from the factory because, in theory, there were no works cars. So they had to be prepared elsewhere. So Sid Taylor ran the other one. I ran mine. They could just about hang on to some of the slower Formula One cars, but the big lump of cast iron out the back kind of steered the car. So you had to be always kind of trying to move the front wheels in front of this big lump there. But they had a lot of torque, not quite as much horsepower. So they were sort of a slightly more difficult to drive Formula One car.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I've just seen just had a comment here in the comment section. Yeah, said a lot of the early F5000 cars were essentially F1 cars with the V8 dropped in the back. Exactly that.
Yeah.
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 They were terrific. I've seen some footage and they sounded superb as well. I did have a look though. I mean, obviously, you've raced all around Europe anyway previously in F3. But I saw the series in 1970 went from it, I mean, it kind of went everywhere around Europe, didn't it? It was like Castle Coombe and Mondello to Anderstorp and Monza and Brands Hatch and Hockenheim. I mean, it must have been great driving all these different kinds of circuits in these tricky to drive cars. It must have been fun on one hand and a bit tricky on the other.
Yeah, well, it was tricky. You had to be careful. We didn't have enough budget to be having any shunts, so I had to be careful not to shunt it. But I had to score maximum points at every round. My job was to win the championship. I didn't. Peter Gethin did, but I finished second in the end. So yeah, as you say, we went to those European circuits, and it was great to go to Monza because I'd never been there before. So when I came back a year later in Formula One, I knew the circuit pretty well. Then we went to Zolder, which then when we came there 3 years later, I knew that track as well.
Yeah.
And well, Hockenheim I knew from Formula 3. So anyway, yeah, it was a very good season. It was called the European Championship because it really was European, and it was pretty good racing.
Yeah, which is good. And yeah, you mentioned that like Peter Gethin won the championship that year, but obviously you'd gone in and Bruce. I guess Bruce, had, as you alluded to, had said he was going to put you into F1 in 71. And yeah, to finish second in the championship didn't do you any harm at all, I'm sure. Again, just looking at the grid again, I just wanted to get there was obviously you and Peter Gethin. There was Frank Gardner, who obviously raced everything. It was Mike Halewood and Gordon Spice and David Hobbs and Mo Nunn and Tony Lanfranchi, Chris Crafton. Again, a very good grid. So to come second, ahead of those guys must have been a shot in the arm going towards F1.
Well, I needed to finish at least second because although it was my first season in it, you can't be hanging back learning. You've got to take the big jump and make sure that you're up there.
Yeah.
Trevor Taylor was also in it, which was good.
Yeah. That was a good grid. Good grid. I mean, obviously, the thing that happened that year, though, in 1970, I don't like talking about this kind of stuff, but obviously it happened, especially when you were racing. We lost Bruce that year.
Yeah.
At Goodwood, and that, I mean, obviously it was a huge shock to everyone, I imagine, at the time.
Oh, absolutely.
I guess for you guys who were very much inside the ropes, it must have been an awful time.
It was just unbelievable. I couldn't believe it. I mean, people say, can you remember what you were doing when you heard that President Kennedy was shot? Well, for me, it's, can you remember what you were doing when you heard Bruce McLaren had been killed? And I know where I was, and I took the phone call from Goodwood, from Barry Newman. I mean, it's almost, you couldn't take it in, because of all the people who wouldn't get killed was Bruce.
Sure.
But there it was. So yeah, shattering. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sure, and obviously, as I said, it was before my time, but I can only imagine it was like seismic, wasn't it? It was a huge thing, especially with you about to go into F1 and all that kind of thing. So where were we? I mean, it was. Let's have a look. Well, yeah, I mean, let's talk about going into F1 from then. I mean, obviously, you knew it was on the cards. I mean, did what happened with Bruce? Did it ever kind of? Was it ever in jeopardy, your journey into F1? Because obviously he was going to put you in, but then you were spotted, or you caught the eye of BRM. I mean, how did all that come together to basically form your F1 debut?
It nearly ended because, as Bruce said to me, "You're my protege," which is a message. You're not necessarily anyone else's protege. So it looked like the whole thing was over after when he was killed, because his plan was he was going to stop driving at the end of 1970,
Right.
and now I was taking his place because he wanted another New Zealander in there. So that drive evaporated instantly. But I was very fortunate that Barry Newman, who sponsored the former 5000 car, he contacted BRM and said, I've got this guy here, he'd be right for you. And it just so happened they had a third car without a seat because George, what was George's name? Canadian guy. There's a question your readers or your listeners will all know. George Eaton.
Oh, yes. Okay.
George got bailed from the team. So Peter Westbury drove the car in Watkins Glen, and that obviously didn't work out. So there was a seat sitting there, and Barry negotiated for me to slot into it.
And
which was from looking like we were in big trouble, suddenly there's BRM.
There's a seat with BRM has become available. I think obviously that year you'd gone from F3 to F1 pretty quickly, but obviously F5000 was a good kind of proving ground, I suppose, for the car and everything. But you joined with Joe Siffert and Pedro Rodriguez, obviously.
Yeah.
Neither very sadly no longer with us. How did you guys all get on? Did you sort of pick up a few bits and pieces from those guys when you joined?
Yeah, well, I was a bit fearful of Pedro because he had a reputation for being they were both pretty tough guys. But they were absolutely delightful with me, so friendly and helpful. And of course, because I was the new guy, each of them wanted me to try to be quicker than the other one because, they had this fantastic rivalry in sports cars. And so I remember in one session at Zandvoort, I was quicker than Siffert. Pedro was over the moon. He was so excited. Yes, you been quicker than him. So that rivalry went on all the time. But they were delightful guys. Terrible thing with Pedro driving that old clunker and getting killed at Norris Ring.
Norris Ring, yeah. I mean, I was going to touch on that shortly, but I mean, it's obviously having lost Bruce that year, and then to lose your teammate in a race that obviously you weren't involved in or anything like that. Again, I don't like talking about it, but that's got to have a huge effect on everyone, isn't it? I mean, obviously there was a rivalry, but I guess you were all, him and Joe were like good pals as well, off track.
Yes, I assume so. I was very much the junior. I didn't. I was worrying about my own career and trying to get quicker and get a better car.
Yeah.
And so, I'd had to start in the old car, and then I managed to get a slightly better car and getting better engines and gradually improving. So
Yeah.
that was my thing.
Yeah, it was it's just a very sad time to have lost Pedro. Because obviously he lost his brother as well, and all that kind of thing. So, real tragic tale of those two, very, very sadly. Do you want to touch though on your F1 debut at Kyalami? You qualified 24th, so got on the grid, for the first race. I've always thought, as a non-racer myself, I've always thought if I was going to make my debut in Formula One, this is what you've been working for. This is what has been the dream for however long it's been. What are your nerves like, or your feelings like when you're on the grid for your first ever Grand Prix at a terrific circuit like Kyalami? What were you thinking, apart from it being really hot, apparently?
Well, I'd raced against the Formula One cars, when they used to mix up the Formula 5000 and Formula Ones at Alton Park Gold Cup. So I was kind of accustomed to that. I was just very disappointed at Kyalami that they tucked me up with the most awful engine, because they didn't want to take me to Kyalami, but my good friend Barry Newman, he got hold of Alex Blignot, who he knew, and so Alex said to BRM, I'll pay you the money for the third car. They didn't want to take it there, but when the organizer says bring a third car, they did. And the engine was so bad, it was embarrassing, that anybody that I tried to slipstream, no matter even a slower car, I couldn't pull out and pass them. So I was pretty grumpy about that. And I thought, for my first race, this doesn't look good. Anyway, I was going along there, but eventually all the BRMs, sadly, they all got fuel, overheating fuel.
Yeah.
And mine lasted the longest. So
yeah,
I stopped.
I saw you got to 42 laps, which was significantly more than Joe and Pedro did.
Yes, mine somehow. Well, I'd stopped in the pits. They poured water over the fuel pump to cool it down, and I went on. But it then eventually got this misfire, and it got worse and worse. And eventually they called me in and said, "Park it."
Yeah.
So that was the end of that. It was very disappointing.
Yeah, I'm sure that was obviously not the way you'd like it to have gone. I did see though, I think it was the next race or the race after that, it took 10th in Barcelona on the Montjuic circuit. I've actually walked around the circuit a few years ago, and it looked like a terrific place to go racing. I think it was, I forget who I spoke to, but someone said it was their favourite circuit. It may have been Jackie Oliver, I can't remember, but they said they absolutely loved racing around there. What did you think of it?
Yeah, I really liked it. It was a better circuit than Monaco, because it lacks a palace and a whole lot of yachts parked beside it. But as a circuit, I thought it was much better.
Yeah, it was certainly was like a bit quicker, a bit more undulating, I guess. I was trying to picture cars thumping past where the Olympic Stadium is now. It must have been pretty terrific. You took 10th there, so nice top 10.
Once again, not happy with that. I thought I should have been a lot further up than that.
Yeah. Okay. So, and you were further up at the Zandvoort. Now, I did a bit of research here. You came 7th, but a very wet Zandvoort, which can't have been easy.
Well, yeah, I didn't mind racing in the rain. Didn't bother me. In fact, I suppose I liked it because a lot of guys hated it, and if you can, you may as well enjoy it because you're there anyway. Yes, I was very good at finishing 7th because in those days points only went to 6th.
Yeah.
So I had a friend some years ago. He kept recalculating my points with all my 7th and 8th that I had. How many points I would have got under the day system. So yeah, it was disappointing to be missing out on by one place.
Yeah. I'm sure getting close, but not quite at that point. I did spot though after Pedro very sadly was lost. Helmut Marko came on board for a handful of races. Did you see in Helmut where he's gone on to become? Yeah, did you see him going down the route of? Obviously, we know the accident and he had to retire because of loss of sight.
Yeah.
Did you ever think he would go and on to kind of management and things like that?
No, I probably didn't even think about it. A terrible
Sure.
thing with that. And he was at the French Grand Prix. He was the quickest of the BRM drivers, and he'd done extremely well in sports cars. So I think he'd have headed on up the line as a driver.
Yeah.
But I suppose once he couldn't race, what was he going to do? Well, turning to management, running his own 3000 team, whatever, and then going on. It's the logical step.
Yeah. I guess if you're not racing, that's the route to go down. Excuse me. Now we've got to talk about this now because you said you were disappointed not to be getting in the points. The first time you did it, I'm feeling you may have been disappointed to not have won the race because of how the race finished at Monza. That famous, there were 5 of you within just over half a second. The first 4 covered by under 0.2 of a second. I mean, what were your memories of that race and of driving around Monza, especially at that time?
Well, yeah, Monza was a bit boring in a way because it was all slipstreaming. But I had a really good engine in practice and seemed to be getting on pretty well with it. So I was very disappointed. I'd had a potentially good result at Silverstone, where just as I was moving into the points, I got a puncture and had to stop. And those days with 5-bolt wheel, it took forever. So once again, I just missed out of the points there. And then I got to try and get into the points here. So Monza, I got cut off from the leading bunch partway through the race. And Joe Sifford had fallen back, and he came up and he towed me back up to the front bunch.
Right. Okay.
So the last however many laps, I was driving around and thinking, right, it all comes down to the last corner in the sprint. How can I trick these other guys? But they're probably all thinking the same thing. How am I going to trick it? But I'd lost the rear brakes because of an oil leak, and it nearly swapped ends on me a couple of times. I almost wiped Chris Amon out. Then he dropped back. And so, around the last corner on the power and thinking, I'm going to have these guys, and they just all accelerated away. Once again, come away a bit grumpy.
Yeah. I mean, and even though it was your first F1 points, but obviously given the circumstances and the closeness of it, I guess there's always that what might have happened. But I mean, for those who aren't aware, I think it was 0.18 of a second, wasn't it? And it split Peter Gethin, Ronnie Peterson, Francois Silver, and Mike Hailwood. And I've actually got on my notes, and people seem to forget that you were, if you're within half a second of the winner, you're normally, that's close. But people seem to forget that, that you were close in there as well. There was another guy who was right on the tail of it. But absolutely amazing. I think still to this day, it's the closest finish in Formula One, isn't it? And you were right in there as well.
5 cars within 0.6. Yeah, must be.
That's incredible. But what I like is it's like the racer's mindset. Whatever the result is, you still think, there could have been more in it. It could have been better. Because on paper, you think first Formula One points, great, but obviously,
Well, I suppose in one way it was a relief I'd finally got some points, because having just missed out at Zandvoort and then just sort of had the puncture take the points away from me at Silverstone. But in catching up, I did make the second fastest lap of the race, so that did me a lot of good at BRM. And then after that, they gave me the later car, 160. So although I didn't get the points, it got a result within the team. Yeah. Sorry, who am I on? Yeah. So that was a positive.
It's a silver lining plus. Yeah, it's a plus to come out of it.
And then I'd qualified pretty well. I'd qualified pretty well in Canada, and then I got on the warm-up lap, like Hadjar. I got punted off by another chap who I won't name, and that was very disappointing. Finally, at Watkins Glen, then I had a rather better run, but ran out of petrol on the last lap just as I'd caught Ronnie. So, yeah.
You must be thinking, come on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And obviously, catching up with Ronnie Peterson's no mean feat as well. Excuse me. That one at Watkins Glen, you were actually in the race. We ran out of fuel, but it was, we'll come to Francois Savert shortly, but it was his only Grand Prix win, which is staggering, isn't it, that Francois Savert only won
one Grand Prix.
The one race, and he won by a long way. It was over 40 seconds. That you're kind of linked to that, which must be quite a nice thing, given what happened with Francois. Yeah. Okay, I was going to nudge forward to 1970, 1972.
I was going to say though that I keep talking about being lucky. Just doing the right thing at the right time. That because Pedro and Joe were off doing their Porsche racing. I got the job of testing the new Can-Am car.
Okay.
Purely because of them being busy, and it was a Tony Southgate job. Once again, Tony Southgate, I had met when I was working at Lola for my 3 weeks at Lola, and he was in the design office there. So that's how I came to know Tony. Anyway, so then when he did this Can-Am car, I got the job of testing it. Then, because Pedro was killed, so the project was abandoned for the moment. And then Sid Taylor borrowed the car. And after Watkins Glen, Brian Redman was after the Brands Hatch race when Joe was killed. Brian Redman wanted to go to his funeral for obvious reasons. And so Louis Stanley called me up, usual thing, 2:00 in the morning. Oh, Ganley, would you like to go to Riverside to drive the Can-Am car? Thank you very much, I'll do that. And luckily I finished third in that race because I knew the track from the tow car from Formula One testing.
Right.
Got on fairly well with it. Excuse me. And so that was a good result.
Yeah. I mean, just good about like Can-Am cars around that time. I mentioned I spoke with Jackie Oliver, and he had like some great success in those cars. They looked absolutely fantastic.
They were. They're wonderful cars to drive. Yeah. All that horsepower.
Yeah, he just said that they were quick and they were loud and they usually handled well. So it was just pretty much what you need, isn't it?
They did handle remarkably well. Because I think by that late stage, Jackie was doing it as well. He was also in that same race where I was third. They had the alloy, although they were big engines, they were alloy. So they were for the size and horsepower, they were quite light.
Pretty light, sure.
And that made a huge difference. So just another little anecdote. So we're at Riverside. And it's a lot of parties as always. And I was at this party about a couple of days before the race, and Jackie Oliver comes and grabs me. He said, "I want a word with you." And I thought, oh dear, what have I balked him on his qualifying lap or something? And he said, "There's a lovely young lady over there, over the other side of the room, that wants to talk to you. So go and talk to her." So I went and talked to the lady, and I took the lady to dinner. And a couple of years later, I married her.
Oh, lovely!
One of the smartest things I ever did.
Oh, that's lovely. I love
Thank you, Jackie. and his then wife.
I love that. Absolutely love that. These little human stories. Just it's actually going to come to a question that has come up. Was that Judy, perchance?
Judy, yeah.
Yes.
Judy Kondratiev, who was quite famous lady racing driver from America.
Yes, because Simon Steele, who I know knows his stuff, he said, and he does say, sorry if this is too personal or anything, but what made your wife Judy such a good timekeeper? Because she did your timekeeping, didn't she?
Yeah, well, she was obviously been involved in racing, very successful at it herself, but she had an extremely high IQ. She was a member of Mensa. She always said I should give it a try as well, but I thought, no. Just to tell your wife you're smarter than she is, don't take a test that might prove otherwise.
Yeah.
So, I mean, she was really very smart and very numerate. So she could time all these cars, on one watch and do the lap chart and everything. Just a fantastic lady.
Yeah, that's lovely. Yeah, and there's lots of nice comments coming into that effect saying how lovely that is, and that's great. Excuse me. Oh, I've lost my train of
So
thought.
in 71 also, had another stroke of luck because I'd driven the B15 Chevron. Chevron needed another driver for their works car. They were running in the Kyle Army 9 hours, which was the week after Riverside Can-Am. So they asked me if I'd like to drive that, and I went and drove that with Paddy Driver and Mike Hayward, and we finished third and, overall and won the 2-litre class by about an hour and all the rest of it. So the last 3 races of 71 were really on a good upswing.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, you mentioned like Mike Howden there. He's one of those guys who kind of doesn't get mentioned enough in car racing circuits. Obviously, we all know what he did.
Yeah,
on bikes, but he was terrific, wasn't he? Absolutely. I know he's my dad's hero. So
yeah. Oh, he was terrific in the car as well, but apart from the bike thing.
Yeah. And obviously, great to have had some success alongside him, I'm sure. Okay, so those on 72 where we were. Again, there was a comment here. I think it was Simon again. It was on Facebook tuning in. He said, bit of a chaotic year at BRM. Was it 5 cars, but there were, what was it, 4 or 5 cars and 10 drivers in the team coming and going, and what on earth was going on?
Yeah, you might well ask. So what happened, my interpretation of it has always been that the US Grand Prix at the end of 71, BRM started 5 cars. They had John Cannon in one. Did George Eaton come back? I'm not sure. Anyway, 5 cars started. And at the end of the race, 30 cars started the race. At the end of the race, there's only 15 cars still running. But 5 of them were BRM. So BRM had 100% finish, 5 cars, and 2 in the points. Joe was second, I was fourth. So Big Lou now knew for sure that he had Formula One in the palm of his hand. So he came up with this scheme where they would have 2 teams, an A team and a B team.
Right.
And the B team would be local heroes, and their country of origin, the local Marlborough office, would pay for them to have the race. So,
Right.
a Frenchman or a Spaniard or whatever, they put into the B team. But they didn't have enough engines to run 3 cars, or hardly to run 3 cars, never mind 5. So that went on for half the season. And then just to make things a little more difficult for themselves, you never want to pass by a challenge, that we were supposed to go, after the success at Riverside, we were supposed to go back and do Can-Am. They eventually scrubbed that plan, but did Interseries, which was European Can-Am. So I was driving the Can-Am car in those races as well, managed by Mike Pilbeam. And then they're running 5 Formula One cars and 1 Can-Am car.
Oh,
Madness.
just organized chaos by the sounds of it.
Yeah.
Semi-organized chaos. Wow, I had no idea that it was the local heroes, and as you say, the local funding as well, paying for it, which was pretty cool. Not sure they'd do that anymore, would they? Probably.
Well, no, there was some bonus scheme where, because of the Watkins Glen result, Big Lou thought, you'd have at least a couple of cars on the points all the time. And you would if they didn't break down. So the whole master plan really fell apart.
I mean, which kind of there's a small cynical part of the brain feels like it might have been inevitable that it was going to
it was
with so much going on.
Impossible thing to do, really.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. I'll touch on here. I want to talk about the P180. Was it only the P180? Was it only one race? I think that it ran at Monaco. Was it?
I drove it at Monaco, and then Beltoise, I think, drove it in Canada, and maybe at Watkins Glen. I'm not sure.
Okay.
They built two of them, and initially we used to fight not to have to race it because it had quite a few teething problems. And it gradually got better and better. And so I elected to have that as my number one car at the Canadian Grand Prix in 72.
Okay.
But coming up the hill where a lot of cars backflip, it went up on its rear wheels and went down the road on the rear wheels like a wheelbarrow, and eventually fell down just in time to turn into the corner. So I drove it straight back to the pits and said to Tim Parnell, I think I'll take my other car, which was 160. So he put a local renter racer into the 180, who pretty soon was off through the catch fences. So in hindsight, I should have opted to drive that at Watkins Glen that didn't have any of those sort of hills.
Didn't have anything that you could
Anyway,
launch
on. It was ultimately the best of the three, of the 153, the 160, 160B. And then the 180, for sure, the 180 was the best and had the most potential. But then Tony decided to leave. Well, that's another story that I'll get to. But so then the 180 was canned, really.
Okay, right. Whatever became of it. No, wow, that's amazing. I've just got this image of going down the straight like that and hoping to level out hoping gravity took over before the corner came. Wow. Okay, one thing I did spot, I want to see, was another strong result at the Nürburgring. Obviously, at the Nordschleife, we know even today it's absolutely fearsome beast. In the era, I've also anyone that I've spoken to from your era, guys like Brian and Jackie and people like that, who drove the Nordschleife. For the want of a better term, you were pretty ballsy guys to take those cars around there. Everyone I've spoken to loved it despite the dangers.
Yeah.
Would you fall into that category?
It's my number one favorite track in all the world.
Is it?
Absolutely.
Right.
It was cruel to me and kind to me because I won the Inter-Series race at the beginning of 72.
Yes.
So that, if you won a race on a track, that gives you a good feeling about it. And then in the Grand Prix, I'd had an engine blow up in practice, so I was fairly well down the field, but gradually worked my way up to fourth place at the end.
Yeah.
So I was quite keen on it.
Yes, when I saw that race, obviously you mentioned the engine blow, so that you started 18th and to finish 4th on the Nordschleife, and there was only three chaps ahead of you. Jackie Hicks, Clay Regazzoni, and Ronnie Peterson. It's pretty, nothing wrong with those guys being ahead of you. I mean, I always, because obviously I've not been around the Nordschleife. I always wonder when you go around there. Are there any bits that stick in your mind, or can you still go around the whole lap? Or is there anything are there any parts of the circuit? Because obviously we as fans, we know about Bergwerk because of Nicky, and we know about the carousel because it's the carousel and like Dottinger and all that, all these famous parts. As a driver, I guess is what I'm getting at. Is there anywhere on the circuit that you think, God, that was good?
Well, yes, definitely. in the rain in the Can-Am car. I remember after the Flugplatz, which is it's called the Flugplatz not because the cars fly in the air, which they do. It's because there's an airfield just over the other side of the fence. But anyway, then you go a long series of left-handers and down that long straight toward the foxhole. That whole section is absolutely magic.
Yeah.
So that's where I actually in the Grand Prix. That's where I overtook most people as I was working my way up the field.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, that but I really enjoy because it's a series of flat out corners.
Fantastic. Which you just have to love, don't you? Flat out corners. That's that's superb. Obviously, fourth behind those guys. I mean, obviously, I get the feeling though, because of the way where we've been talking about results and things like that. Was there obviously 18th to 4th is terrific, but were you thinking I could have got on the podium? was that the way your mind works? Or was it...
yeah, if I'd not had the engine blow up and then lost the whole of the final day where the times are set, then I'd started. But it's all what if didn't. So the end result, I'm fourth.
Yeah. Pretty good. Very, very good though. And there's another similar situation at the Österreich Ring. And now the original Österreich Ring is one of my all-time favorite circuits. I remember watching it when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Absolutely crazy. A crazy circuit. Obviously they've shortened it and tightened it up and sterilized it a bit now. But you took 5th there. Did you like it as a circuit?
I loved it.
Right.
Yeah, I had a bit of trouble in practice. And then that was one of those classics. When we rolled up onto the grid and the flag goes, I dropped the clutch. The thing popped out of gear because I hadn't pulled it in there hard enough. So I was rolling slowly in the middle. Luckily, nobody hit me. So then I was a long way back. So I worked my way up to, where did I finish? 5th. Yeah. I got to 5th place and I was catching the ones in front. And I thought, I'm going to get these. And the thing ran out. Suddenly, I noticed, because you see it in your peripheral vision, the oil pressure needle was right on the bottom.
Oh,
wow! So I had to knock it off and just cruise along. I got it to the end without being overtaken, but with the oil pressure needle hovering dangerously.
Wow!
Near the bottom.
Wow!
The oil tank had split and it leaked a lot of the oil away.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so it had properly gone. I guess there, the end of the lap, it's kind of downhill, which kind of makes it a touch easier, I assume. Was it the Bosch curve, wasn't it? The last
Bosch was that last one, and as you say, you come down the hill to the finish line.
Yeah.
But the really great corner was the one after the pits. You go up the hill and turn, and that was completely flat. But then you went along the side of the hills there, and
that was behind the hill, isn't it? That they're now going front on.
Behind the hill, it was a straight that wasn't straight, but you could do it flat. And then the climbing right-hander at the end, that was absolutely magic corner.
Superb, yeah. Because that's the bit of the circuit they don't use anymore. They've
that's right. Sadly, they took that bit away. The flat-out corners.
Yeah. Because obviously there was that right turn. Then they put in that little chicane, didn't they? Like the 80s, I think it was. And then now they've brought the whole thing back right to the top of the hill, and it's just kind of killed it a bit for me. But yeah, I'm glad that you as a driver liked it as much as I did as watching it.
Yeah, I loved it. I always loved really high-speed corners, because I guess I'm lazy, so I don't want to change gear. I could just steer it.
That does sound good, actually. That sounds great. That's lovely. Heller's Licht, if I recall correctly. Yes, I think that might have been the name of the corner. I think that's right. Yes. Okay. So that was 72. I'm glad we covered the Österreich Ring because I loved it. So I'll take a quick sidestep though while we're in 1972 to your first race in the 24 hours of Le Mans.
Yeah.
Had you done any real endurance? I mean, you mentioned there was a race at Kyalami, I think, an 8-hour at Kyalami. Had you done any sort of real long endurance racing up until that point?
Kyalami 9 hour was the only one that I'd done like that. Yeah.
So how did it all come about? Because it was with Matra, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, we were at the Canadian Grand Prix, And, I was good friends with Tim Chinkin and Ronnie Peterson. We always used to tell each other what was going on. You figured, but let me tell you this. And they said, "Oh, we've got fantastic news. We've just signed with Ferrari for sports cars." And I thought, "You lucky guys, God,
Yeah.
sports car drive as well." And I was sort of commiserating with myself, I suppose, because Enzo Ferrari used to have these scouts, and one of them used to come and talk to me all the time. And I thought, "Oh, this is hopeful, isn't it?" Anyway, when they chose the drivers, I wasn't on the list. Although Enzo said in his book he remembered me. Well, yeah, that was very good, Enzo. He didn't give me a drive. Anyway, so it can't have been more than half an hour after Tim and Ronnie had told me their big Ferrari secret that Javi Crombach, who was a French journalist, he came and grabbed hold of me and he said, "Oh, Howden, would you like to drive for Metro? It's 24 hours. Yeah, okay, count me in."
I might do, yeah.
What Metro had decided, they were going to run 3 cars and they wanted only Formula One drivers. And there would be 1 Frenchman in each car and 1 foreigner to them.
Okay.
So they finished up with an Englishman and 2 Kiwis. And so that was the basis of it. And then we were all matched according to our physical height. So Eamon and Beltoise went together.
Okay.
Esperolo and Hill went together, and Francois and I went together.
Right.
Because we were sort of the same size. And they did it really thoroughly. We did 3 24-hour tests at Ricard in an older car because they wanted to make sure. So the first test, they had to stop too many times and fix it. And they said, "Okay, come back in 3 weeks' time and we'll do it again." And they had all the drivers there. So you didn't do too much driving, over the 4 hours with 6 guys, but everybody was trying to be quicker than the other one. So the car got crashed to death. So it was a pretty stern test. Anyway, we only just made 24 hours and they said, "No, that's not good enough. Come back in 3 weeks' time." So we all came back and did it again. And then we lasted, I think, 27 hours or something. So they said, "Right, everyone go home except Ganley and Eamon." And Chris and I stayed on then for the rest of that day. And we were told to drive the car as hard as we could, absolutely flat out. So an hour on, an hour off. And we had this wonderful time thrashing the thing to death. And eventually, I don't know how many hours with them, they said, "Okay, that's probably all right."
Wow. Wow. That must have been so much fun. That must have been great, just being told you could just absolutely hammer it.
Yep. Yeah.
Wow. That's incredible. And again, it's one of those cars, obviously, before my time, it's one of those cars that when anyone says, mainly when you see something with Jackie Stewart or something, and they say the word Matra, I always think of that car because it was a beautiful looking little thing. And from what you were saying, I guess it was just as good to drive. Similar question to before, really.
Yeah, well, they built 3 brand new cars for the race. And then we all went to various times and had our seat fittings. And then each driver pairing went to an airfield a couple of weeks before the race. And we all bedded in our own brake pads. And they were marked. You had your own set of brake pads, essentially. So it was done so thoroughly. Nothing was left to chance. It was the best organised team I've ever driven for.
Really?
Really well done. Managed by Gerard Ducarouge.
Oh, yeah.
Who eventually became the Lotus designer.
Yes, I was going to say went on to Lotus.
Well, Ligier and then Lotus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a guy who knows his stuff for sure. And I do want to talk about Francois. I mean, we'll come to what happened, but he's one of those guys that, as I say, he only won 1 Grand Prix because it was very tragically cut short. What was he? From what I can gather and what I've read and everything, everyone said he was just a lovely guy. Everyone loved him, apart from the fact that he was better looking than everyone. Lovely looking chap. What was he like to not so much on a personal level, but just as a driver and as a co-driver and as someone who could set up a car and things like that. What was he like to work with?
He was terrific. He was one of the nicest guys you could ever meet. Very competitive, but really lovely with it. Very talented and everything. I mean, he was a classic pianist and everything. We got on really well. And then, as you know, at the end of the season, the French government wanted no foreigners in the car. So Graham and Chris and I got the heave-ho. And Francois said to me on the grid at the next year, he said, "This is a real pity. You and I are a very good combination."
Oh,
so
that's lovely.
We had that friendship all that time. And then I remember coming around the corner of the Glen, and there's a terrible side pod lying there. And initially I thought it was Jackie, and then it turned out to be Francois.
I want to touch on that shortly, not in too much detail, because I don't like that kind of thing. I just would like to finish up though on that year at Le Mans, because obviously the car was obviously very good. You'd tested the heck out of it.
Yeah.
And I guess you thought we've got a chance to go well here as long as the reliability holds out. You did the long test and everything. Just quickly about like Le Mans in general though, the first time you were there, did it grab you? Because everyone I've spoken to, a fan or a driver, I've spoken to many guys who have driven there, have said it just feels different. There's something about it. It's got an aura to it. Did you feel that when you were there first time?
Well, it's got all that history. I thought as a race to drive, it was a bit boring.
Right. Yeah.
And because we expected to win, and Francois and I were creeping away and getting a bigger and bigger lead until the rain came and got in the ignition. So it was like an enjoyable experience at a very famous venue, and then we got it snatched away from us. That did that. I'm very good at snatching things away from the wind, as you know. So after that, when I went 3 more times, Matra were very good, although they wouldn't take foreigners. They recommended me to Gulf, so that's why I finished up at Gulf.
Right.
But Gulf, because I'd been spoiled with the whole Matra organisation, and I never found it anywhere else. Gulf are nice enough people, but the car wasn't as quick as the Matra. And
that was the Mirage, wasn't it?
Yeah, the Mirage. Sorry, the Mirage. And then we ran out, because they had those engine problems, so we ran out of oil sometime on Sunday morning, and that was it. And then when I went back twice more driving Porsches, I don't like racing with that roof over my head. So
I was going to say, does it feel different?
In the Porsche, I found a bit strange. So no, and it would have been wonderful to have won it, and once again, we were so near to winning it.
Yeah.
And then the lady ran into me. So
yes. But because obviously it was Henry and Graham, wasn't it, who took the win? But I mean, but you got second on your first ever race at Le Mans, which obviously not a consolation because you want to win, but it must have been pretty special being up on that famous podium at Le Mans. We've all seen the pictures of it. Must be a nice little box to have ticked, even if it wasn't quite the one you wanted.
Yeah, nobody ever remembers who finished second.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's like nerdy people like me do, but
well, it's so near, and I had the same thing at Spa later, and then had the same thing at Nürburgring a few years after that, where you think it was ours to win, but something goes wrong. Everyone can say that in racing.
Yeah, there's a lot of what ifs and maybes, but unfortunately, there's a lot of things out with your control. Unfortunately, just very quick, a chap I bumped into at Goodwood last year. He was your teammate in the Mirage. Was Mr. Bell, Derek Bell. Quite good at racing a sports car. Not bad. He again must have been a great guy to work with as well. Because he is a lovely chap, isn't he?
Oh, yes. Well, he was a sort of established team leader at golf when I went there. I was a bit surprised that I was paired with him. I thought that I'd have been paired with Halewood, but
Okay.
they put Mike and John Watson together. So yeah, we did the season. Bit of unreliability. Sadly, decided not to do Nürburgring or the Tiga Florio, and I really wanted to do the Tiga Florio, but
Yeah, I'll bet.
didn't happen. So
Yeah.
there you
Also,
go.
we mentioned Brian, didn't we? Brian Redmond. He did the Tiger Florio, and
Yeah,
I think it went wrong for him once there, didn't it? With Brian.
yeah, had a bad
He's
accident.
yeah, but he's been on for a chat and lived to tell the tale, and he still tells that story with a smile. So fair enough, fair play to him. When it went wrong, but yeah, shame that couldn't have been done.
Brian is probably the most underrated racing driver of our era.
Yes, I think I might have introduced him as such when I brought him on. He's one of those guys. He can just drive everything and drive it really well. And because he was going well when he had his accident at Spa, wasn't he? He was going well, and the suspension failed on him. And
Yeah, it did big time.
yeah, big time. Tough cookie, that chap. Yeah, absolutely. Right, okay. Just look at the time; it is rattling on, but I'm okay. We're all good. Hope everyone else is. Back to F1 there for 73. Well, I mentioned Williams. They're based about 25 miles over my right shoulder. Big fan of Williams. How did it come to be that you joined up with the late Sir Frank?
Late in 72, Marlborough said to me, we think we'd like another team because the BRM 5-car job wasn't working very well, and they thought that was a bit of a wasted effort. So they said, what would you recommend? Well, there was some vague talk because I tested Formula One car for Matra in 72. BRM didn't know about that. And so I had a connection with him. And so initially I said that, well, then that wouldn't work because Marlborough against Gitan, or Camel Gitans that they had. So then I looked at other teams and decided that Frank was the one to go with. So I said to Marlborough, I think Frank Williams. They said, right, you go to Frank Williams and take our money with you. So that's how I did.
Oh, okay. Right. So you obviously bought the money. I mean, obviously with Frank, there was always going to be money involved, obviously. Whoever could bring the most. Excuse me.
Well, another slightly strange, funny story if I can tell you.
Yeah, go for it.
Because he's gone now. But so Big Lou offered me all kinds of treasure to drive for them in 73. Number one driver, 2 cars, everything. And so this was sort of all right. There was one little thing in the contract that I didn't particularly like. And then Ronnie Peterson called me one day and he said, I know you're negotiating for next year with BRM. He said, call our friend Luciano Bruschi, who was an Italian Cockney, lived in Maidenhead, and was a friend of Clay Regazzoni. And when Clay came to England, Luch was his translator because Clay didn't speak English.
Oh, right.
And so I called Bruschi and I said, Ronnie says, I've got a call. You got something to tell me? He says, yeah. I was with Clay, with Louis Stanley 2 days ago, and he's offered Clay the number one driver, 2 cars, blah, 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 blah. The whole rest of it, exactly what he was offering me. So I was due to meet Stanley the following week to finalise the contract. And so we go, you had to meet him at the Dorchester, where he sat in front of those revolving doors. And he would tell you, everyone who came in and out, he'd tell you who was sleeping with who and who was doing this. He was obviously making it up. But anyway, so I said, right, it's number one driver, 2 cars, this much money, blah, blah, blah. Yes. And I said, well, how is it that you're able to offer that same deal to Clay Regazzoni? Well, he nearly fell off his chair because the chances of me finding out that he'd been negotiating with Clay about 0. Anyway, I said, well, I don't think I want to sign this contract. He said, every driver since Fangio has signed that contract. Who are you to refuse? And I said, well, nobody really, but I'm refusing. So that's when our negotiations came to a halt, and Clay did take up the drive.
Wow, that's amazing.
He
I think
was a bit too tricky.
I think fair enough. If you think there's something going on elsewhere that you don't agree with, absolutely right.
Yeah, so that's why then I and Marlborough Money went to Williams, but Marlborough are only paying half, and ESO were paying the other half.
Right. Okay. Yes, because he's so with it. Yeah.
So the problem was that ESO forgot to mail the check, so Frank only had half enough money to run the team.
Oh, I see. I didn't realise that was the case, but obviously not helpful. Not helpful at all. But was it the FX? Excuse me. The FX3B. That was a cracking looking car. Again, I mean, obviously, I can only go on what they look like, but it was a very very smart looking thing. Again, how did it compare to the BRMs that you've been?
Well, what are you calling the FX3? To me, the first car, the Coke bottle shaped car, was the FWA3, and then the square one was 04. Which one are you?
I was going to go. I was going for the more sort of square. I mean, the Coke bottle one was very nice as well, but I was going for the square kind of one with the front of the cockpit.
Yeah. Well, we started the season with the Coke bottle one, but that they became illegal beginning of April. So then you had to have the crushable structure one, and it was quite a good handling car, but its aero was terrible and it had no cooling. So the engine temperature gauge was pegged right at the top all the time. And Keith Duckworth used to come and say, "You're losing so much horsepower, you need to fix up your ducting," but never got done.
I mean, it was, yeah. I mean, shame that that car became illegal because it did look good. Again, it was a terrific looking thing.
This one, yeah, designed by Len Bailey.
Sorry?
It was designed by Len Bailey, that first one, the Coke bottle one.
Right. Yeah. He designed a few very pretty cars. I've gone on the tip of my tongue. I can't remember what it is, but yeah, very good looking.
Len also designed the M6 Mirage, which became
Okay.
Which became the GR7, same car.
Right. Okay. Nice looking. Yeah, he obviously had a good eye. Now, one thing I do want to say was it the second race of the season for Williams. You raced the Interlagos. Again, I call it the proper Interlagos layout.
Yeah.
We off camera before we touched on the old proper Spa layout. The Interlagos, well, it must have been incredibly physically demanding. Because even now, when they race the World Endurance Championship there, they say the G forces are off the scale and things, but the long circuit must have been very, very difficult physically.
Well, it was an interesting circuit because it was a very clever design, the way that it weaved its way back and forth within inside itself.
Yeah.
But when you came up past the pits, and now, it's a tight left and a right,
yes.
But there was a big, long, almost flat out corner there to go out onto the back straight, which is still there. And that was absolutely fantastic. But the G forces were so great. I don't know about other people. I had to put my knee under my hand to hold the steering wheel around. You couldn't hold it there. It was so much force against you. But it was a wonderful circuit. Yeah. Like that.
Yeah, and it was probably double the length it is now, isn't it? Because it went back in on itself and back around, and back out again, and
yeah.
Oh, yeah, terrific. I've seen some footage from it, and it looks absolutely superb. Seventh there, unfortunately, just outside the points. Which you've alluded to before, unfortunately. One thing I did spot as well, you raced the first ever Swedish Grand Prix at Anderstorp, which was obviously on the back of Ronnie's success, wasn't it? From what I've seen and read, they made a huge kind of deal about it, the first Grand Prix in the country. Do you remember it being as such? Or?
Yeah. Well, I'd raced there in Formula 3 a couple of times, so I knew it. So we started off fairly well there, but once again, the overheating got on top of us. So I didn't enjoy it particularly in the end.
Yeah.
We raced Formula 5000 there as well.
Okay, so you've been there in plenty of, kind of.
Yeah.
So you knew the circuit, just reliability, the old thing. Now what was I going to go for here? Oh yes, this was again. I keep coming back to negative things, and I don't mean to, but it was that big one at Silverstone,
Yeah.
which I believe was 6th or 7th round of the season. Folks, if you're not aware of it, you can Google it if you like. I personally wouldn't. I don't like seeing shunts like this. But end of the first lap, wasn't it? Was it Jody Scheckter, wasn't it? Turned himself around, hit the
Yeah.
pit,
Yeah.
pit wall, and came out.
Yeah.
We've all seen the reactions of people on the pit lane and things. I guess, how on earth did you miss it all? Because everyone went in. Was it 9 or 10 cars, wasn't it? There were loads of cars piled in, and cars were ripped open, and there were no real serious injuries from what I can gather, really serious ones. But
Andrea Danamitz broke his ankle. That was
Adamovich broke his
only one.
heel. It was ankle and heel, wasn't it? Yeah.
Fortunately, I qualified far enough and made a really good start that I was, reasonably well up the field. So as we came around, I watched Jody go down the grass, and it was very dry grass. It was a hot day, and there was a light breeze blowing across, and it was blowing the dust across the circuit as Jody went down there. And then I watched him come back straight across the track and hit the wall, and bounce back a bit. And I looked to see if I could get between him and then in the end I swerved around the back.
Right.
So I got through. But what I think had happened is that a bit after me, 2 or 3 cars after me, the dust had covered the whole thing. So then the people were piling into each other, more or less blind.
Right. So you kind of got through while there was still some visibility there.
While you could still see. And the amazing thing, as after I went round and carried on, I looked back and I saw Jackie X come between Jody and the wall. And I thought, gee, I could see there was enough room. And many years later, I talked to Ken Turrell about it, because Ken was standing right above it, wasn't he?
Right.
And I said, I can't believe I looked at it and I couldn't get through. I figured I couldn't get through, but Jackie did. He said, oh, yeah, because Jody had smashed the master cylinders and the road sloped and it rolled back just in time for Jackie to come through. Wow. So he was actually rolling back then into the traffic, which was trying to dive around the back of his car.
Oh, right. So, he would have.
I was very lucky. Yeah.
Goodness me. I mean, it's one of those, it's a famous bit of footage, but yeah, it's incredible that you got through it. And that was when that's when I called the proper Silverstone layout as well. It was just fast and the old perimeter road. It was it was a proper job. Which again must have been a terrific circuit to drive if you like high speed corners.
Well, yeah, Woodcote was fantastic, and that I used to say you really drove the rest of the circuit just waiting to come back and do that high speed Woodcote. It was beautiful.
Oh, I love that. That's something I'm going to take away from this chat. That line right there. Just the rest of the circuit was just a route back to Woodcote.
Yes, it was.
That's terrific. That's amazing, and got in the top 10 there. I think it was the very next race, though. Again, something I don't like to dwell on, but we touched on it. Was it Nürburgring, and then it was Zandvoort?
Sorry. Then no, it was Zandvoort.
I think it was
with Roger accident.
With Roger Williamson again. It's one of those we spoke off camera about people not understanding the dangers of it, and F1 wasn't as sophisticated with the fire marshals and fire engines and ambulances and everything else. I think there's still a lot of people still feel a bit angry that Roger was lost in the way he was, because it was so needless. It was just where it happened on the circuit, and the one ambulance and the one fire truck was on the other side. I have put a post out about it in the past, and people have said, why didn't the drivers stop and help? Why didn't they do that? what they don't realise is that people thought that it was David Purley's car, wasn't it? And they thought it was that he had got out. I guess that's what I've heard anyway.
Nobody in the race realised that Roger was trapped in the car.
Right.
And so, but just up the next little, we came around that corner, just at the end of that straight, there was a big fire engine. And I think, had the race director stopped the race, and he's the one to blame, really, and I've always
Sure.
blamed him.
Sure.
I've said in the past there must be a special place in hell for him. Had he stopped the race, and then all the drivers did, and then brought the fire engine, would have fixed it, or all of the drivers had to stop, then everyone's there in their suit, flicked the car over and got him out.
Yeah, because the didn't have suits, did they? They didn't.
No, they didn't. And then some people did come and try to help, and the police with the dogs drove them back and all of that. And interesting that it was a great message for the drivers. When we were all absolutely devastated at the end of the race.
Of course.
When we found out what had really happened.
Because there was no champagne or anything, didn't they? They just said this has happened, and yeah.
So in the last race, when Francois had his accident in practice, every driver stopped instantly. My wife said it was really weird. The cars are coming past, and then no cars come, and the whole circuit went quiet because everybody stopped at the scene of the accident.
Right.
The message to the drivers: you guys got to look after yourselves because officialdom won't.
Wow. I mean, and again, that's astonishing by today's standards. I mean, there's obviously, as I said off camera, there's like lots of younger fans don't. Well, and why would they? They don't understand how it used to be. It was a case of, you said it. If you didn't want to get hurt or die, don't do it. Which would be staggering to the younger generation now. But I mean, it must have been obviously awful at Zandvoort because it was so needless, wasn't it? There was no way. The accident, okay, it's not nice when a car goes upside down, but it wasn't really that bad, was it? With Roger, very sad, and you kind of touched on it there. The end of that year, we very sadly lost like Francois, and again, not something I want to talk about. I've heard Sir Jackie talk about it and what he saw. But it must have been. I mean, with the greatest respect to Roger, he was towards the back, but Francois was the one for the future, wasn't he? And that must have been a huge shock. I mean, were you on track when it happened, or were you
with Francois?
With Francois, yeah.
Yeah, it was just up the Esset, so I came around, and flags, and here's the whole side part of the crushable structure lying in the middle of the track. So instantly stopped because it's obviously a Tyrrell gone into the barrier there, or down the hill. And so I was one of the first who got there, but nothing you could do.
No, I would make a point of not asking people what they saw, because I don't want to know really. But yeah, it was just a very, very, very tragic year. I mean, obviously, I wasn't even born till 8 years later, but I know that year is, it's not well remembered by people. Just quickly though, something else happened that year. I mean, I did two things actually. There was an accident in qualifying at the Nürburgring. Must have been frustrating. I think you did. You sit that one out?
Well, no. So you had to make sure you did 3 laps at least, on the first day in case it rained. So, but at the end of my first lap, as I came up, there's that long straight, and then it goes down a hill and comes up and comes to a tight right-hand corner. So you approach that corner at about 175, 180, something like that. And when I put my foot on the brake, there's nothing there. And so I pumped and pumped. And eventually it hit the curves and went up in the air, and it looked like it was going to come upside down, but then it somehow righted itself. Almighty was looking after me, and I went down a ravine and stopped and crushed the monocoque and crushed me up. Anyway, it turned out that the rear brake calipers hadn't been tightened up, and one of them had fallen off up the straight. The BRM mechanics had gone back down there after practice. They said, the marks of the caliper bouncing on the road go way, way back down. But of course, when you're in the car, you don't hear anything bounce, and it was on the steel braided hose, so it I was sort of towing it along the straight,
Oh,
and obviously when you get to the end, there's no brakes, so that broke that car off.
wow. Goodness me. Just little stories like that. You guys are made of stern stuff. Yeah, tough chaps. I don't think the guys these days would be so pragmatic about it. But then I do want to talk about Canada. It was a bit of a I don't know. It was just a bit of a cock up, wasn't it? It basically 'cause it was it. I can't remember if it was where, but had there been an accident or something in the race that had knocked out some of the timing stands or something had happened with the timing, hadn't it? And then there was an issue in the
Um,
pits and all that kind of stuff. I
I
mean,
think
I don't know if
because
you
of
can take it over.
the rain and the visibility. Yeah. So what happened was when we were being driven around in open sports cars, parade thing, like they take the drivers now around on a low loader truck. So we were all there, and all of a sudden there was this torrential downpour. So we all got wet, and then the start was delayed. And I decided, because I had remembered with Bruce McLaren, he nearly won the Canadian Grand Prix some years earlier, and it had rained and it dried out, and then his battery went down. But I thought this will dry out, so I didn't change my car. A lot of people put a lot more wing in, and they disconnect the anti-roll bars until they got time to change, put soft springs. I didn't do any of that. So I thought it would dry out. So, and the other problem was at Mosport, you couldn't get the whole field in the pits at one time. They're too small, very narrow road and too short. So I decided that what I would do was wait until Tim Schenken in the other car had his stop, and lots of other people had their stop. And our guys that had a practice run on changing Tim's tyres, we had to go from the wets to the slicks. And I'd come in when I could drive straight to the pit, and our guys were rehearsed. And so I did that. And then when I came out, there was the Jody Scheckter, Francois Sever accident at the side of the road, just around the first corner.
Yeah.
That's what precipitated the safety car while they sorted that out. So I was driving around, and then I came up behind the safety car, and I went to overtake it, and they're waving at me. No. Point number one. So, what, me? Anyway, yep, stay where you are. So that's why I was at the head of the queue. And then we trolled around behind that, and then they let it go. So I thought, well, they reckon I'm leading, so I better stay here. So off I went. Eventually, Emerson caught me and passed, and then Jackie Stewart, I had him up the curb a few times, not letting him pass. Anyway, so they got past, and then I carried on. According to my wife's lap chart, Emerson won, and I was third, but that wasn't the official result.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of read that. I mean, someone said that you were first and you weren't sure, and you weren't. Then someone, was it Colin Chapman, thought that Emerson had won. He did his cap thing and threw that in the air, and he ended up coming second behind
Peter Rivson was given the
Revson,
win.
wasn't it? Peter Revson was second, and then you were classified sixth, but you thought you were third. I mean, it's just an absolute non. I mean, someone's just put in the comments here, the problem was the safety car and too many drivers coming to the pits when there was no experience with pit stops. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's why I waited until they'd all got cleared it out, so I was able to drive. There was no speed limit in those days. I could drive straight to the pits, park. But you see, Jackie Stewart, for example, he'd come in the first time, and there was nowhere for him to go. So Ken sent him off for another lap. When he came back, the thing fell off the jack, and yet he was classified ahead of me. So that shows you, it was right. Anyway, the result goes down in history, and because Teddy Mayer said that Revy had won, naturally he would. Just like Chapman said that Emerson won, but I think Emerson did win. Chapman was right to throw his
Yeah, right, yeah. It's quite good, the insight of you thought who had won and everything, but yeah, bit of a mess that obviously wouldn't happen today, unfortunately. Just want to hop forward quickly to the following year, 1974. You joined March from Williams. Was there an opportunity to stay with Williams or a desire to, or was it just
I had a contract with Williams for 24. But there've been so many all season things have been breaking and falling off, and the brake calipers fall off. you think this is, and the thing forever overheated. And I thought, this is just not a good place to stay. And I'd always got on well with March. I was the first guy ever to drive a Formula One March, the 701, and I'd had a great relationship with him. And they had a drive going. So there I was.
Yeah, went straight in. And again, I've asked this. I mean, you had a certain chap called Hans Stuck alongside you. I've had Hans on here, met him in Goodwood last year.
Yeah, lovely.
He's a heck of a chap, isn't he? He's a
He is,
larger than life character.
He's great.
Did you get on well with him, I assume?
Yes, well, you can't help but get on well with
I was going to say
Stucky.
it's
He's such an entertaining guy.
yeah.
So BMW were funding his car, and March thought they had a sponsor for my car, but then they didn't. So we did the 3 races. We did Argentina, Brazil, and then Brasilia. They had a non-championship race in Brasilia.
Right.
And then they were saying to me, we've got a bit of a problem here. We hope we can keep you. And then I had these Japanese guys chasing me with this magic car of theirs.
Yes.
And I was saying to Max and Robin, I've got this other offer, and they go, see if we can hang on. But in the end, the sensible thing, I thought, was the bird in the hand, because Brambilla was there with a lot of beta money.
Yes.
And I thought March had no option if they want to keep going. They'll have to take it eventually. They might get a couple more races, but then eventually they'll have to do that. And so the Japanese people had 4 cars, 55 engines, and mechanics and everything. And I said to them, oh, well, yeah, who's the number 2 driver? Oh, no, Mr. Ganley, all for you. And the old thing, it's too good to be true. It almost definitely is.
It probably is, yeah.
So it was not at all as presented. Supposedly Honda were behind it. It's all nonsense.
Wow. So when did you find out that it was all nonsense? Was it when you'd already signed the deal and everything?
Well, history has told us that what happened at the time. Unfortunately, the car as it arrived, the 4 cars as they arrived, did not meet the FIA regulations. So that was a bit of a problem. And we did endless testing, getting nowhere. And eventually I said, if you don't sort this car out, and I said, you need to do this, and they actually, to give them their due, they scrambled around and did it. And then finally it's done in time for the British Grand Prix, Brands Hatch. So I'm there, must have been the Thursday, wasn't it? Because we were still on Saturday race or something. Anyway, so I'm there well before practice and they don't come. And I phoned back to the workshop, and the English chap, John Carpenter, was there. And I said, what's happening here? Oh, he says, they're just all sitting around drinking tea. So I think they were facing the moment of truth. They said they had to wait for orders from Tokyo, maybe. Anyway, they didn't show up until the following day, and it's all over by then. You never catch up.
No, sure. Goodness, mate. Yeah, it's amazing how these things went together or didn't, as the case may be. I again, they're going back to the look of the car. I think it looked quite smart. White with the airbox and the white, with the flag on it and everything. I did read somewhere though you said it was the worst car you've ever driven. Was it? Was it bad?
No, I don't think I've ever said it's the worst car I've ever driven. No, I've driven.
That's good. Someone has obviously used some artistic license there.
Yeah, well, people make up all kinds of stories, don't they?
They do.
They do. But like me in the 6-wheel March, there's quite fantastic, silly stories about that. But no, the car finally, as I drove it at Brands, was halfway decent. And I said to them, you guys shot yourselves in the foot here. If you'd come on the first day, we'd have been in the race. Anyway, Nürburgring, they were first in line, first day's practice, first in line. So they'd taken that on board. And unfortunately, a couple of miles out, then the rear suspension fell apart. So that's why it speared off into the barrier and chopped the front of the car off.
Yeah, and obviously that was say about the Nürburgring, and obviously that was kind of unfortunately the end of the F1 chapter. I mean, I did again read. I don't know how true this is, but you were able to get yourself out of the car. Obviously, you damaged your ankle, but you didn't realise, and you. But it wasn't until you got out the car and to the barrier that you realised that your feet and ankles weren't in a good way. Or
Yeah, well, it obviously had broken everything from the tips of my toes to just below my knees.
oh,
The surgeon said it was all mush, but
wow,
it was when it ripped the front off, it took the high pressure line for the fuel pressure gauge, and
right,
it sprayed fuel everywhere. Well, all I could smell was petrol, and I thought, I need to get out of this thing.
yeah,
So I got out and I walked as gently as I could across the track and pulled myself up the barrier and then lowered myself down. And the surgeon, several people looked at the x-ray and said, don't know how you managed to walk on that. I said, if you think the car's going to catch fire, you'll walk on anything, won't you?
you'll find a way to get away from it. Yeah,
Yeah.
wow. Obviously, shame that it ended. Yeah, the F1 side of things ended the way it did. I mean, I guess. I mean, did you kind of obviously things aren't as advanced as they are now. We saw the accident. Was it Antoine Hubert very sadly lost his life, but the chap who hit him, he had a severe lower leg injuries, and he's back racing now. I mean, obviously that wasn't. I guess you knew that was never going to be the case after this.
Well, I mean, I didn't really know because it had no feeling in it. And then as I got carted off to the appropriately named Cranken House, which is the hospital
Oh, yeah, yes.
now. And then I was there for a couple of days, and then Mike Hayward crashed during the race. So pretty soon he's in the hospital in the bed next to me.
Oh, right.
Slightly similar injuries. And our old friend Louis Stanley rocks up on the Monday. And he was very good at this sort of thing. He said, would you boys like to be flown back to England? And we said, yeah, of course we would. Need to get in an English hospital. So he said, leave it to me. I'll deal with it. So he comes back. He loved all the glory. He said, I'm going to have you helicoptered from the hospital up to the Cologne airport and flown from there. So he said, the Luftwaffe say it's impossible to land a big Huey helicopter on this tiny little lawn outside the hospital. He said, but I've told them the RAF will do it, and so they decided they can do it. They're not going to have another be defeated by the RAF again. They've been thrashed only a few years earlier. I'm sure that was all BS. But anyway, so this big Huey helicopter clatters in, the rotors chopping the trees and the tail rotor into the shrubbery. We get loaded on, and the captain says, so we are very early. Would you like a trip over to Nürburgring? Yeah, okay, why not? So they left those big sliding doors. You know, you've seen MASH, big sliding doors on the helicopter. And we're on, and he flew it round sort of on its side so we could look down and see. So we did a lap of the Nürburgring.
Wow.
And then flew off to Cologne airport and flew right across the airport and landed right behind the BEA as it was then, I guess, Trident. And another big Lou thing, he said, BEA say they only take one stretcher case per flight. He said, but I have explained to them that on this occasion they will be taking two. And they did. So,
wow.
So we arrive at Heathrow. We get transferred into a typical union thing. He's taken off the aircraft, put in a Heathrow ambulance, brought round the front, put into a regular ambulance. But Louis Stanley was there to meet us, and he rode up to St Thomas because he'd booked us in there. He'd got the best man, Mr. Urquhart, who looked after Sterling and John Surtees. So we were really well taken care of.
Wow, that's amazing. That is top drawer kind of service, isn't it? You know, yeah. Wow, love that. That's great. That's very cool. Okay, I just want to touch on another couple of little bits that I did see here. Rallying. I remember this is back in, I think it was 73 in the Citroen. There's a brilliant photo of the Citroen SM on two wheels almost. It looks fantastic. Was rallying something that you'd always wanted to have a go at, or you'd done plenty of? Or?
I did a little bit in New Zealand, but wasn't really my thing. But this was more like the Tour of France, so it was a combination of rallying and circuit racing, mostly circuit racing or special stages. And so my friend Ray Hutton was sports editor of Autocar.
Right.
Excuse me. And he said, would you like to do the Tour of Britain in the Citroen? Okay. Excuse me. And I should have taken the weekend off and gone sleeping. So this Citroen Maserati, which was a great motorway cruiser, but wasn't a rally car anyway. So we did it.
As I said, there's that terrific photo I saw. I mean, I might have to send it to you to get signed. It's a superb photo, folks. If you want to Google it, of Howden driving the Citroen, it's a great image. Great fun. And what was the one more thing I wanted to look at? Oh yeah, the 75, the Nürburgring 1,000 kilometers. You and Tim came second in the
Mirage. Yeah.
In the Mirage, the GR7 again. Taking that car around the Nürburgring must have been very good.
Yeah. Well, once again, my expertise in snatching second place away from the win. So we agreed a time and we set off, and we found we could easily beat that. And so pretty soon we're way away in the lead. But then the team manager or owner was George Luce, and he went to Willie Carlson, who was running the Works Alfa Romeos, and he asked Willie if he was going to make another fuel stop. And Willie said, yeah, we will stop for the benzene. But Willie had no intention of stopping. So George stopped us. So we lost all that time putting some more fuel in, which we didn't need to, and then didn't change the left front tire, which they should have. So from a 20-second lead, we had a 20-second behind, and I just couldn't catch them. So we finished second.
Yeah. Unfortunately, one of those things, but yeah. So you don't need to stop. Listen to the drivers. Always listen to the drivers. Okay, I just want to come to the post racing and specifically founding of the race car company with Tim. Was it something that you'd always wanted to do post racing, or was it just something that came along at the right time? The opportunity
came along. Bruce McLaren, when they actually put me into the 5,000 car, he said to me, "One day you want to build your own cars." And I said, "Never, ever in a million years. No." But he had been through the frustration of being a driver, and that's why then eventually he broke away, as did Jack and Dan Gurney and John Surtees. Because you got all these ideas, but since you don't own it, you can't do them. A little bit different for me, because although I built my own Formula One car at one point, I couldn't get the money to run it, so it lies dormant. Anyway, so must have been 75, and we were driving for George Luce, drove for him at Le Mans as well. And Tim was approached by somebody to fund a Formula Ford project, and he said he didn't know whether it was right or wrong, and he brought all the documents to me and said, "Can you look at this and tell me whether I should do it?" And I read all this stuff, and I said, "Well, yeah, you should do it, but with me, not with the other guy." So that's why we started, and we called it Tiger because we wanted an animal name. We wanted either 4 or 5 letters, and then the added bonus, could it incorporate our own names? Well, my wife scratched around, moved letters here and there, and then she said, "How about Tiger? It's sort of an animal. It's your initials, and it's 4 letters, so that's why it's Tiger."
Perfect, fantastic. And I mean, obviously, you said it began with the Formula Ford and the single seaters, which I know plenty of chassis were made. Then you kind of went down the sports car route as well. How did that sort of growth happen, or was it just some demand, or was it?
Once again, it's like because John Webb, from Brands Hatch.
Yeah.
John Webb, he decided to start Sports 2000, And he called me up one day and he says, "Here, Ganley, I'm starting this new formula. I want you to build cars for it." And I thought, oh, it'll be like F100. You know, that was another sports car series that really went down the drain. And so I said, "Oh, yeah, all right, John," and had no intention of doing anything. And then Tim was contacted by some people who wanted us to build Sports 2000. So he said, "Come on, we're going to build these Sports 2000." I said, "No, it's going to be a complete failure. It'll never work, this formula." Famous last words. So eventually he prevailed upon me to build one, but somebody else had designed it, and it was a bit of a mess. So I thought, it's a bit embarrassing. I better design a proper car. So I designed a complete new car, and we had a customer from Holland came over, and Ian Taylor had arranged that he would race the car at Silverstone, and Tim and I went up. We used Richard Lloyd's workshop and prepped the thing and lined it properly and did everything, and put a Sam Nelson engine in it, which is what you had to have. And come the start of the race, Ian just drove off into the distance. And Jack Nellerman had brought his car over, and he just followed Ian, off they went. So there we were, suddenly from being nowhere in having a bad reputation for rubbish Sports 2000. And at the end of the race, well, that was a good day's work, wasn't it? And the phone, Monday morning, the phone started ringing, and it rang, and it rang, and it rang. And we sold 30 cars just like that.
Wow.
Then the problem was we had to build them.
Well,
And so then, year after year, we sold 250 of them.
Wow.
But having done that sports car, then we were prevailed upon, well, couldn't you build Group C cars and IMSA cars? So we started doing that. We built 33 IMSA and Le Mans cars.
Wow.
And then we built a couple of Can-Am cars, and then we built Atlantic cars, and we built 400 and just over 400 cars altogether.
Yeah.
By then I was totally exhausted, and I said, well, the day we started it, I said to Tim, "Look, no matter what happens, I'm not doing this for one day more than 10 years. So when the 10-year mark came up, wait, time to go.
Right.
And I did actually stay on for another 6 months, and then
Yeah.
sold up and gone.
Yeah, and absolutely right. I mean, it's amazing how that one race can sort of start a snowball effect, and it goes on and becomes so successful. And the one I did like though, was it the C2 sports car championship winning car? Was it this?
Yeah.
Was it the 85? I think it was GC85.
Well, we started with we built the we used to call them GTs if they were for America, or GC if they were for Europe.
Yeah,
Basically the same car, some slight difference in regulations.
yeah,
And so we built GT and GC 84 and 85 and had a lot of success. So then I was prevailed upon to build a slightly bigger car,
right.
with a bigger range of engines. So we built them for Buick and Chevrolet and Ferrari and Porsche and DFEs, everything.
Wow.
I hadn't actually learned to say no at that point. So, oh yeah, you want to put a Moscovich engine in it, whatever, bring it around. So yeah, a lot of work and great fun when you're winning.
Yeah, I'll bet.
So you can see, so you can just see in the picture here. Here. That's our first big GT. Was originally the GC83, which was upgraded into the GC84. That car, and that led on from there. So that was our first one.
Wow, terrific car. Couple of questions have come in from Keith Mail and from Simon Still. Hello, chaps. Keith has said, how close was the Ganley F1 car, or the Tiger F1 car, to getting to the track? And Simon said, did Howden build a F1 car? Basically, similar question.
Yeah, right. So I designed it. I hired a draftsman, a guy called Martin Reed, very talented. He drew from my sketches. Between the two of us, we built the chassis. And then later on, we had the engine, all the suspension, everything except the finished bodywork. We had the radiator duct, didn't have the cockpit done. and a Dutch company were going to pay for it all. And then when their money didn't arrive, we just put it all back in the box, sold the engines, and that was the end of it.
Yeah, that was a shame. I think a lot of people would have loved to have seen that come to be and see.
Well, they can see a picture of it in my book.
I was actually going to. That was going to be the next thing. I was going to come to the book. There it is.
Very good.
I'll hold my hands up. I've not read the book. I will hold my hands up as yet, but I've spoken to a couple of people who have read it, and they said it's a terrific read. Is it just your
Sold well.
just your story, I guess?
It is basically just a lot of the stuff we've been talking about tonight. It starts off when I was born and my school days, and
Yeah.
on and on like that.
No, we'll have to. We can give that a plug. Give it a plug. Give it a purchase, folks. Get onto Amazon or online and give it a
No, you
purchase.
can't buy it from Amazon. When I first was going to do it, I talked to a lot of the booksellers whether they would carry it, and most of them said no, because you'll give it to Amazon and they just slay us. No point. So I made a promise to them all I would not let Amazon have it, and I never have.
Super.
Good. Now only sold through Horton's Books.
I like that. There you go. Horton's Books, folks. That is where you need to head.
Horton's Books in Marlborough.
I love that. That's excellent. A man of your word. Not giving it to the big folk. Yeah.
Okay.
Lovely. Love that. Just very, very quickly. We want to talk about F1 these days. I mean, do you follow Formula One or anything closely these days, or is it?
Yeah, I follow Formula One. I watch all the Grand Prix. I also follow IndyCar.
Yes. So I love IndyCar. I'm a huge fan. I've been a fan for 37 years now. I love it.
Yeah.
It's great.
I also go to. I'm the patron of the Historic Formula Junior Association, so
Yes.
I go to a lot of their events, and I see a lot of the historic 1000cc Screamer Formula 3 guys as well. So yeah, I still have a vague involvement. Plus, I'm in the BRDC, obviously.
Of course, yeah, of course. Because you were on the board there as well, I believe, for a while, weren't you?
I was on the board for 10 years, but you are time barred at that. So when my 10 years was up, they made me a vice president, and that's where I sit today.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. That's right. I must admit, I didn't realise you were vice president. That's fantastic. It's very, very cool.
I'm a vice president.
Okay.
A vice president. There's several vice presidents.
Yeah, there's a few. Just quickly, I mean, obviously you've raced in the era that you raced in Formula One and everything else like that. And obviously you still follow it now. I was wondering what you think of what Formula One has become from where I mean, obviously it's a huge global thing, American owned, and lots of street circuits, Miami and all that kind of thing. I'm just wondering what you, as perhaps an old school racer, thinks of F1 and what it's become.
Well, it's a great technical exercise. I think that's very interesting. I'm not sure how much fun the drivers have, apart from reading their bank statements, which must be very fun.
Must be very enjoyable.
And so, yeah, no, I still think it's a great show. It's a few peculiarities, but that's just progress, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lovely sport.
Just while we're on the subject, I mean, you mentioned IndyCar. The Indy 500 was at the weekend. My favourite race. I love it. I guess you saw it. The first half was accident strewn, wasn't it? But the second half of the race was terrific, wasn't it? When we actually got some like green flag running, it was terrific.
Yeah, well, for any Kiwi, the start was pretty distressing when the clock shunted. So.
I mean, without my hard compound hat on, I am a Penske man because the first one I watched, I was 7, 1988, and Rick Mears won it in the Pennzoil Penske. Yep. And I've loved that car, and I've loved Penske ever since. And when I saw what Scott McLaughlin, what happened to him, I was genuinely upset. It was so unfortunate, wasn't it? So unlucky.
Yeah. In fact, the Kiwis generally did not have a good day because Marcus Armstrong finished up pretty much at the back, and Scott Dixon didn't make any headway as well. Whereas he's been so successful in the past.
Yeah, I honestly, I think Scott Dixon is the most underrated driver globally of the last 25 years. I think he's astonishing. But yeah, his brakes caught fire, and
Yes.
Marcus Armstrong almost got taken out with Marco Andretti, didn't he? It was just
he did. Yeah, no, it was not the Kiwis' day.
No, absolutely not. I mean, just while we're on the subject, I did see on social media somebody was saying that why is Scott McLaughlin never in the discussion for who's the best racing car driver in the world? Because he absolutely should be. You know, he's a 3-time Supercars champion. He's won loads of single-seater stuff. He's gone to probably the biggest name in IndyCar and has won races and taken poles and goodness, you know, he's unbelievable, isn't he? He's a terrific driver.
He is, absolutely.
Yeah, thoroughly agree. Okay, right. We've run over. Oh my goodness, 2.5 hours. My word, we've gone on for a while. My apologies. It's flown by. We're going to wind down. Just with some sort of fun questions that I always ask. Just quickly, do you have any a favourite racing car that you've ever driven, and do you have a favourite circuit to drive on? I think we know the answer to the latter.
Well, I always say you should not have favourite circuits. You know, they like children. You should love them all.
Yes.
But for me, number 1 is Old Nürburgring, number 2 is Old Spa, and number 3 is Monaco. If you want me to go on, number 4 then is Montjuïc. Yeah, Old Nürburgring and Old Spa are just wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I'd said off camera, we drove, when we were at Spa the other week, we parked up at Burnenville up by Les Combes, and very, very slowly, within the speed limit, of course, drove back all the way through the Master Kink and down to Stavelot. And it's something about it, just makes you smile.
The Master Kink was just one of the great all-time corners in racing, you know, because you arrived down there at around 200 and you had to do it flat. I must say, when I first went and looked at it, I thought that you would never, ever be able to do that flat. But eventually I thought, you know, they're paying me quite a lot of money. I better do it flat. And once you've done it once, it's all right. Yeah,
fantastic. Just as a disclaimer, I didn't do it flat. I was in a Hyundai Tucson and I didn't do it flat. I'm sure you guys had more fun than I did, but I had fun anyway. Terrific bit of circuit. This was an interesting one. This is going to be very tricky. Did you ever have a best sort of teammate co-driver that you enjoyed driving with? I mean, you mentioned you got on very well with Francois and you worked well together with him. I mean, was there anyone that you enjoyed working with as a co-driver?
Well, we've already covered Francois and then Tim Schenken.
Yeah.
I have to say, Mike Hailwood was pretty good, but we only drove that together at that one time at Kyle Army, so it was fairly brief.
Yeah. God, there's some good names. There's 3 great names there. It's very good. That's terrific. Okay, let's have a very quick look. I mean, was there a driver that you thought with a few more sort of breaks could have made it really big up to F1? I mean, apart from the guys who we very sadly lost, was there anyone that you raced when you were younger or in F3 that you thought they never quite fulfilled the potential for one reason or another?
That's an interesting question. No, I don't think I couldn't name anybody who I thought that the ones who should get there got there in the end by one way or another.
Yeah.
I can't say there was anybody that I encountered on the way up that I thought should have been there, but didn't get there. So.
Yeah. That's good. The ones that should did. That's good. We'd like to hear
that. You asked me also about which is my favourite car.
Oh, yes. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. The BRM Can-Am car.
So many people of your generation say the Can-Am cars. Every single time almost. I think even Jackie Hicks said the same thing he did about Can-Am or something. And superb cars. Okay, this is the final one. It's a horrible question. I don't know why I ask it. I ask it to everyone. I don't think there's really an answer to it. Just quickly, you've shared the track with some amazing names, and drivers and things. I'm just going to reel off a few just for 30 seconds or so. I've got a little list. I've just handpicked here. You've shared the track with guys like Al Holbert and Maston Gregory, David Hobbs, Alan Jones, who went on to be F1 World Champion, Joe Siffert, Pedro Rodriguez, Denny Hulme, Jackie Oliver, Brian Redmond, Beltoise, Chris Amon, Peter Gethin, Reutemann, Depaye, Bell, Halewood, Schechter, Watson, Regazzoni, Jochen Mass, Hans Stuck, Pescarolo, Carlos Pache, Everson Fittipaldi, Sever, Peterson, Lauda, Andretti, Hill, Stewart, Rent, X. I mean, goodness me. Quite a lot of talented drivers there. Is there any that stick out in your mind? Maybe not being the best, but just as standing out in your mind as having something a bit extra, or being, I don't know how to put it. Maybe, as I say, not the best, but someone who sticks out in your mind as thinking he was almost a complete package, or anything like that.
The most complete package in my time was Jackie Stewart. He had it all figured out, and he was quick. And he knew why he was quick, how he was quick, and how to become quick. The most talented people ask me, who's the fastest guy you ever raced with? Chris Amon, Hidden Shoulder.
How he didn't win a race.
Yeah,
It's
exactly
staggering, isn't it? From, again, who I've spoken with, I forget who it was. Oh, it was with Simon Taylor, the broadcaster, who I know you've spoken with. I spoke with him, and he said something similar. He said it's a tragedy that Chris Amon never won a race.
Yes, well, if you remember when he was with Ferrari, all those races where he was on pole and running away with the race, and some silly little thing would go wrong with the car.
Yeah.
If all those had turned into wins, he'd have been a world champion if you add them all up.
Wow. That's, yeah.
It'd be why he left Ferrari in frustration, because there's so many silly little things went wrong.
Yeah, he was just so close to being at the very, very top, and it never quite came to be, just because of how it was. But it's nice to hear Chris Amon get mentioned, because obviously people rightly talk about all these other guys, but yeah, Chris Amon and Jackie Stewart, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Oh, hang on, we got here. Oh, this is one last thing. I think this is a nice little thing to end on. A comment from Simon Steele on Facebook. He said, one thing, Robin Herd said if he could select drivers for his F1 team, he would choose Howden and Ronnie Peterson. That's pretty good. That's pretty good company to be mentioned alongside, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, Ronnie was brilliant.
Yeah.
And I got on very well with Robin. I was the link to get Robin into Formula One, because you may have heard the story. One day, Bruce McLaren said to me, we really need a designer, because he couldn't do everything. He was designing the car. And I said, oh, well, I was talking to Alan Reese the other day, and he's got this friend called Robin Herd who works at National Gas Turbines, would like to get into Formula One design. So Bruce said, right, give me the phone number. And so we met with Robin and hired him. Wow. Robin forever after said, it was all my fault that he got into Formula One.
And he thought it was a great thing, I'm sure. It's terrific. No,
that's lovely, Robin, to say that. Yeah,
that's terrific. That's, as I say, I think that's a lovely spot on which to end. I'm sorry we've gone on far longer than we've ever planned.
No, I'll natter on about motor racing all day long.
Oh, that's it. We're off air for 3 hours, folks. But no, firstly, folks, thank you all for tuning in. There's comfortably over 200 of you, so thank you very much for tuning in, and for what has been a very enjoyable chat. Certainly, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. But of course, the biggest thanks to you, Howden. Thank you so much for coming on and having a chat. It's been brilliant speaking with you. I could have gone on for 4 or 5 hours with you, hearing your stories. But thank you for sparing some time. It's been terrific.
Yeah, my pleasure, and thank you to all the other viewers, listeners, for tuning in. I hate to think it was only my mother that tuned in.
There's been very, very good. There's some lovely comments coming in saying thank you, and it's been a very entertaining evening. So thank you, folks. Thank you to everyone. We will be back next week. But in the meantime, thank you once again, Howden. It's been brilliant speaking with you.
Thank you. Right. Good night.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.